Değerli konuklar, sevdiğimiz güzel şehrimizin bugün bir trafik sorunu var. Diğer dostlarımız yolda. Onun için biraz geç başladık ama zaman içerisinde onların da katılımını bekliyoruz. Brand Finance Forum İstanbul ikincisine hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Teşekkür ederiz. Ayağınıza sağlık. Bugün inceleyeceğimiz konu aslında çok tartışılan firmaların pazarlama üzerine yaptığı yatırımların geri dönüşü, bunların etkisi, bu etkinin hesaplanabilmesi. 3 değerli konuşmacımız var. Profesör John Roberts çok uzaktan geldi, Sydney'den. David Haig, eksik olmasın CEO'muz Londra'dan. And Cohen Powles, o artık bizden olmuş. Çünkü bir Kayserili eşi var. Dolayısıyla pastırmayı ve mantıyı çok iyi biliyor. Evet, benim konuşmam hem bir giriş olacak, hem de Türkiye'de pazarlama karar süreçlerinde sahip olduğumuz alışkanlıklara bir göz atmak olacak. Eminim burada söyleyeceklerimin pek çoğu belki de bu meclisten, sözün meclisten dışarı. Ama iş hayatımda, deneyimlerinde sık rastladıklarım olduğu için bir genelleme yaparsam da beni mazur görün lütfen. Pazarlama karar süreçleri ülkemizde ağırlıklı olarak duygusal ve sezgisel veriliyor. Henüz matematiksel olarak bu sürecin işlediğine çok az tanık oldum. Ve böyle bir alışkanlık marka değeri üzerinde tabii ki etkisini zaman içerisinde ciddi bir şekilde hissettiriyor. En önemli özelliğimiz önemli bir sorumluluğu, pazarlama sürecindeki önemli bir sorumluluğu aradaki kişilere delege etmemiz. Aradaki kişiden kastettiğim distribütör ya da satıcımız. Çok büyük bir güven duyuyoruz ona. Onu hoş tutmaya çabalıyoruz. İnançlarına bağlı olarak kimini Umre'ye gönderiyoruz, ödüllendirmek için, kimini de Phuket'e gönderiyoruz. Ancak zayıf bir ilişki söz konusu. Satıcı ne olursa olsun, doğası gereği iktisadi bir faaliyeti, bu pazarlama süreci içerisinde iktisadi bir faaliyeti üstlenmekte. Dolayısıyla onun bütün düşüncesi kendi çıkarlarından ibaret. Belki tanımlamam bazen ağır oluyor ama satıcı olduğu için markayı da satabilir. Eğer menfaatleri daha uygun olursa bir başka marka için faaliyet gösterir. Hiç de onu yargılamamak lazım bu kararından dolayı. Ancak eğer ben geri bildirimi benim ürünümü kullanan insandan doğrudan alabiliyorsam, bunu becerebiliyorsam o zaman çok daha sağlıklı bir bilgiyi edinmiş olacağım ve karar süreçlerim üzerinde çok olumlu etkisi olacak. İkinci bir özellik, çok sık rastladığımız, hedef pazarımızı çok genelleyerek tarif ediyoruz, tanımlıyoruz. Flu bir tanım oluyor. Bir firmada bana dediler ki, biz Almanya pazarına gireceğiz. Ben de sordum, hangi tarafından? Kuzeyden mi? Güneyden mi? Doğudan mı? Batıdan mı? Hayır, gene o delege etme rahatlığıyla bir distribütör bulur, onunla işe başlarız dediler. Ama 90 milyon nüfus var dedim. Üstelik ABD'den sonra belki de dünyanın en seçici pazarlarından biri. Bu kararı nasıl bu kadar rahat veriyorsunuz? Onun üzerine oturup çalışıldı. Çekiciler çok önemliydi. Yani tır dediğimiz, arkasında dorsesi olup götüren araçlar. Bir hesap yapıldı, neresinden girmesi gerekir? Dolayısıyla o zaman görüldü ki, North Rhine-Westfalen eyaletinde 355.472 çekici var. Hiç değilse bir ipucu elde etmiş oldular. İşe nereden başlayacaklarına dair. Eğer böyle bir şey yapmasalardı, bunu sezgisel, duygusal, belki de başkalarına delege ettikleri, onun nedeniyle verdikleri, ona dayanarak verdikleri karar nedeniyle eğer pazara girmiş olsalardı, o zaman çok önemli riskler gelecekte bu kararların nedeniyle marka üzerinde olumsuz etkisi olacaktı. Galiba Amerikalıların bir sözü, yanlışım varsa değerli konuşmacılar düzeltir ama facts and figures, vakalar ve rakamlar. Bence ülkemizde artık bunların konuşması, diğerlerinin de dinlemesi galiba markanın selameti açısından en doğrusu olacak. Çünkü eğer duygusal kararlar verirsek ya da çok derinliğine inmeden pazarlama karar süreçlerimizi yürütürsek o zaman bazı hiç umut etmediğimiz sonuçlarla da karşılaşabiliyoruz. Pazar umut ettiğimiz kadar büyük değilmiş. Biz hata ettik buraya gelmekle. Ya da umut ettiğimiz pazar payını biz burada elde edemedik. Bu kadar çaba gösterdik. Dünya kadar da reklam yatırımı yaptık. Ya da biz bu parayı kazanamadık burada. Boşuna bu operasyonu yapmışız. Geçenlerde daha birkaç gün içinde galiba yemek sepetiyle ilgili bir haber okudum. Rusya'daki faaliyetini durdurmuş. Çünkü Rusya'da eve teslimat çok güçmüş. Kış nedeniyle vaktinde götürülmüyormuş. Arabayla götürülürse de trafiğe tıkanılıyormuş. Ama bunu bilebilirdik. Eğer gireceğimiz pazarı çok iyi sayılarla, vakalarla inceleyebilseydik belki stratejilerimiz de doğru olurdu. Bu nedenle şirketlerde pazar ve tüketici bilgi kültürünün yeşermesini her yönetici bence birinci ödev olarak almalı. Ve bu bilginin yönetim kararlarına yön vermesi en sağlıklı sonucu doğuruyor marka açısından. Araştırmalara nedense masraf gözüyle bakıyoruz. İnancımız pek yok. Ancak ne olursa olsun hiçbir şey bilmemektense bir kırıntıları dahi alıp bize ışık tutacak bir bilgiyi edinmek çok çok önemli. Dolayısıyla tüketicinin ya da pazarın büyüklükleri ile veya yanında onun satın alma kararlarını etkileyen özel durumları sayısallaştırıp önümüze koymamız pazarlama karar süreçlerimizi çok değiştirecektir. Önemli bir eksikliğimiz de bu süreçlerde pazarı bir bütün olarak görüyoruz. Onu dilimlere ayırmıyoruz. Halbuki segmentasyon artık çağımızda pazarlama başarısının, ticari başarısının olmazsa olmazı. Çünkü böylece grupları derinliğine tanıyabiliyoruz. Onların ihtiyaçlarını tespit etmemiz kolaylaşıyor ve sayısallaştırmamız da kolaylaşıyor. Kaç kez bunu tekrarı yapıyor, kaç defa tüketiyor, ne büyüklükte tüketiyor. Böylece pazar payını kestirmemiz de mümkün oluyor. Aslında şu sözü belki de her yöneticinin duvarına asması tavsiye edilebilir. Herkes için her şey eşittir, hiç kimse için hiçbir şey. Artık ortalama bitti. Bireyler çok önemli olmaya başladı. Ben bunları tespit edip birbirine benzeyenleri bir grup içerisinde toplama başarısını gösterirsem o zaman güçlü rakamlar elde etmiş olacağım. Bu çok yaygın bir reklam jargonuydu. Bunu yıllarca aşina olduk. ABC bir grubu erkek ya da kadın. Hemen böyle bir heterojen tanımlamamız vardı. Bize kolaylık sağlıyordu. Ama sağlamıyor. Çünkü birbirine benzemeyenleri bir araya getirmeye uğraşıyoruz. Halbuki biz birbirine benzeyenleri ayırıp onlardan kümeler oluştursak o zaman saymamız da kolay olacak, izlememiz de kolay olacak. Mesela böyle genel tanımlamalar yerine plazalarda çalışan kadınlar diyebiliriz. Ya da yurt dışına sefer yapan çekici sürücüleri gibi. Herkes kendi iş kolunda böyle bir tanımı rahatlıkla bulabilir. Ve bulduğunuz zaman sayıyı tespit etmek kolaylaşıyor. Yetersiz segmentasyon yüzünden Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde 30 bin ürün lansmanının başarısız olduğu söyleniyor. Çok ciddi bir rakam. O ürünler ne umutlarla geliştiriliyorlar, o markalar ne umutlarla yeşertiliyor ve üzerine yatırım yapılıyor. Sadece doğru tespit edilememiş, sayısallaştırılamamış ve de bu nedenlerle doğru konumlandırılamamış lansmanlar yüzünden. Pazarı eğer çok iyi tanırsak, sayıları da önümüze koyabilirsek, kimin satın aldığını, ne satın aldığını bilebiliyoruz. Neyi satın aldığını da tespit edebiliyoruz. Çünkü aynı ürünün alt başlıkları, farklılıklarını geliştirmemiz de mümkün oluyor. İhtiyaçları tespit etme şansımız oluyor. Ve benzerleri bir araya getiriyoruz, grup yapıyoruz. İşte o zaman o grubun sayısını çok daha kolay tespit ediyor ve pazar kestirmelerimizi, tahminlerimizi de çok daha sağlıklı yürütebiliyoruz. Tabii ki bu verileri nereden bulacağız? Gayet güzel konuşuyorsun. İyi günler de her yerde veri de bulmak kolay değil. Doğru. Çok kolay veri elde edilebilen şanslı ülkeler var. Son çalışmalarımda Hindistan'ın bunlar arasında olduğunu gördüm. Ve ne yazık ki kendi ülkemde de çok kolay veri elde edilemediğini tanık oldum. Asansör üreticileri platformu diye bir platforma kaç üretici var diye sorduğumuzda Sanayi Bakanlığı'na sorun dediler. Onların meslek örgütüydü. Dolayısıyla zorluğumuz var. Ancak bazı iş kolları çok şanslı. Özellikle müşterilerine kart verip onu takip ederler. Dolayısıyla onların izleme şansı çok yüksek, takip etme şansı çok yüksek, sayılar var elinde. O şanslı bir iş kolu oluyor. Ama onun dışında bazı iş kollarında nedense bazı ülkelerde veri elde etmek, bunları derlemek çok güç. Dolayısıyla zorluk çekilecektir. Ancak ne kadar olasılığı düşük bile olsa, hiç rakam bilmemekten bir şey bilmek, ilerisi için kestirme yapmakta yararlı oluyor. Son bir genelleme, sık rastlanan bir şey. Tabii bu anlattıklarım yapılmadığı için bütçeler pazar odaklı olmuyor. Türkiye'de genelde bütçe alışkanlığını şöyle gördüm. Bir önceki yılın %15'ini arttırarak yapalım. Şimdi bir önceki yıl geçmiş bir yıl. Geçmişin üstüne ben gelecekle ilgili bir karar veriyorum ve belki de o pazarın dinamikleri çok hızlı değişti o esnada. Onu izleyemediğim için çok kolaycı bir yolla şirketlere soran bütçeyi nasıl yapıyorsunuz? Bir önceki yılın %10'u ya da 15'i diyorlar. Eğer gruplara ayırabilmiş olsalardı, segmentasyonu yapıp sayıları bilmiş olsalardı, o zaman ihtiyacı tespit edecekler, pazar paylarını yaklaşık tespit edecekler ve rakamı doğru ortaya koyacaklardı. Diyebileceklerdi ki 82 bin tane avukat var. Biz bunun %10'una erişip satabilsek 8.200 eder. İşte bu çok sağlıklı bir yaklaşım. 8.000 olsun, hata edin. Ama hiç bilmemektense 8.200'e ulaşmak çok yararlı bir şey. Dolayısıyla bir pazar hakkında bilgiyi edinmek için büyük gayret göstermek gerekiyor. 2, tüketicileri benzer nedenlerle bir araya getirip tasnif edip gruplamak gerekiyor ki oradan sayı ve ihtiyaçlarını tespit etme başarısını gösterelim. 3, pazar araştırmalarını ihmal etmememiz gerekiyor ki onların satın alma alışkanlıklarını izleyebilelim. 4, bütün buralardan elde ettiğimiz kaynakları pazar odaklı bütçe yapıp bu defa kaynaklarımızı, şirket kaynaklarımızı nasıl en verimli bir şekilde kullanacağımızın da kararını verelim. Aksi halde bir yere geliyor, siparişleri yetiştiremiyoruz diyorlar. Neden siparişleri yetiştiremiyorsunuz? Çünkü belli bir tüketici grubunda beklenmedik bir sipariş doğuyorsa o daha önceden hesaplanamamış, kestirilememiş bir şey oluyor. Ve şirketleri sık zora sokan ya atıl kapasite ya da aşırı siparişle karşı karşıya kalınıyor. Halbuki pazarlama odaklı bütçe yapabilme başarısını gösterebilse, bu karar süreçlerini bu sözünü ettiğim şekilde ilerletebilseler, o zaman sonuçta böyle sıkıntılı günler, sıkıntılı anlar yaşamamaları lazım. Tam yolun yarısında istihdam sorunu da doğabiliyor. Çünkü kestirilememiş bir pazarla karşı karşıya kalınıyor. Tabii ki benim konuşmalarım bugün konuşma yapacak 3 değerli konuşmacıya bir girizgah oluyor. Bugün buraya katılan değerli konuklarım aynı zamanda bir kitabın ilk kez karşılaşacaklar. Lansmanı oluyor. Değerli çözüm ortağım David'le uzun bir süredir üzerinde çalıştığımız ve Türkiye'de büyük ihtiyacı hissedilen, sık sık sorular gelen marka değeri konusunda 325 sayfalık bir kitap hazırladık. Kitabın içeriğinde çok merak edilen konular var. Özellikle hiç markanın yasal unsurları üzerinde durmuyoruz. Marka sahipliğimiz ne kadar güven altında, ne kadar garanti altında? Bunu bilmemiz lazım. Çünkü yasal olarak korunamayan bir markanın değeri sıfır olacaktır. Ne kadar bir geçmişi var marka değerlendirmenin? Baktığınız zaman 25 yıllık bir tarihi olduğunu görüyorsunuz. Yöntemler neler bununla ilgili? Kazançlar nasıl tahmin ediliyor? Nasıl modelleme yapılıyor? Sürekli bir söz söylenir, brand equity diye. Bir türlü onun Türkçesini ağırlık mıdır, mevcudiyet midir, sermaye midir derken marka ağırlığını daha kolay buldum. Bu nasıl ölçülüyor? Dolayısıyla pazarlama başarımız nasıl hesaplanıyor? Bilançolara nasıl, muhasebe kayıtlarına marka nasıl geçmeli? Markalı bir faaliyet, markanın dışında markalı bir faaliyeti değerlendirirken nelere dikkat edilmeli? Pazarlama bütçeleri nasıl hazırlanmalı? Ve değeri gözeten bir pazarlama anlayışı ve yönetimi nasıl geliştirilmeli? Çok önemli bir güç aslında marka sahibi için. Onu lisanslamak nasıl mümkün? Ve de hatta bazı gruplarda dahili lisanslamak nasıl mümkün? Aile nedeniyle edindiği koç kafasını ya da sağ işaretini kullanırken nelere dikkat etmesi gerekir? Ve değerlendirmede uyulması gereken ilkeler, etik kurallar. 4 de önemli ilk var. Zannediyorum Türk okuyucusu belki de ilk kez karşılaşacak. David bu konuyu açacak biliyorum ama ISO 2010 yılında marka değerlendirme standardı ilan etti. 10.668 diye numaralı. Onu bulacaklar. Ayrıca uluslararası değerlendirme standartları topluluğunun tanımlamalarını bulacaklar. Fiziki olmayan varlıklar nedir? Ve bizde yerleşmeye başlayan yasal mevzuat ya da standartlar olarak özellikle Türk Muhasebe Standardı 38, maddi olmayan durağan varlıklar nedir, nasıl tanımlıyor ülkemiz? Ve 1 Ocak 2013'ten itibaren uygulamaya geçilecek Uluslararası Finansal Raporlama Sistemi 13 No, gerçeğe uygun değer ölçümü nasıldır bulacak. Bugün burada bu kitaptan elde edilecek geliri biz Türkiye Korunmaya Muhtaç Çocuklar Vakfı'na, koruncuklara bağışlamak istiyoruz. Şimdiden hepinize koruncuklar adına teşekkür ederim. Bir ricamız var. Sorularınızı lütfen önünüzdeki defterlerine not alın. En son bölüme saklayın. En son bölümde 3 değerli konuşmacımız sorularınıza cevap verecek. Beni dinlediğiniz için hepinize teşekkür ederim. Sağ olun. Dear John, may I invite you? This direction.
Have we got the presentation coming up? Thank you. Firstly, let me say how pleased I am to be here today. I'm very much looking forward to finding out more about branding in Turkey and some of the things that are happening. I want to talk today a little bit about how we think about our brands in the future, think about our brands going forward. We spend a lot of time thinking about what our brands are doing today, and I want to think systematically about what our brands could do tomorrow. So I want to talk about building and leveraging brand assets and how we can understand where they can go, the potential, and where they can't go, their limits. So my thesis is that I want to talk about, if we want to maximise the value that we get from our brands, the expected net present value from our brands, then my belief is that we're missing, in industry, we're missing some parts of the puzzle, or we're at least underrepresenting them. And I want to talk about some parts which are very simple, very easy to implement, where we might be able to do perhaps a better job of analysing and calibrating what our brands can do and what we should do to make them do those things. So how can we think about where our brands can go and where they will go and how much that's worth? If we think about our brand equity is going to tell us what we own in the customer's mind, and that brand equity will create value for the firm, and that brand value that comes from the brand comes from the earnings that the brand will give. So how do we work out what those future earnings are of the brand? Because that is what represents our brand value. And I want to think about that in a fairly simple way. Now, let me start by saying that there are two sorts of marketers. There are quantitative marketers who look at numbers, and there are behavioural marketers. So we have people who do qualitative marketing or behavioural marketing, and they ask the process questions. What do people do before they enter this market? Why do they enter the market? How do they think about pricing, etc.? And they try to understand the process. They're the psychologists, the anthropologists, the ethnographers, etc. And then we have the quantitative marketers who tend to try and put numbers on things. How many people will enter? How much will they be prepared to pay? When will they enter? The number people who are the statisticians and the economists. I started off as a mathematical statistician before they moved my branch in the telephone company into marketing, so I became a marketing director just because of the organisational change. And statisticians get a bad rap. Statisticians don't have a good reputation. No one thinks that statisticians are normal. Well, statisticians are normal. I was normal. When I was young, I used to go to dances, dance with young ladies, make polite conversation. And those who don't believe me, I have a picture here of when I was young at a dance, making polite conversation with a young lady. And so here I am at this dance, the Association of Statisticians annual dance, making polite conversation. Do you come here often, occasionally, infrequently? Never? You've got to ask. If marketing statisticians get such a bad reputation, why did I go into quantitative marketing rather than behavioural marketing? I want to show you a picture of behavioural marketing in action at Procter & Gamble. It's not a pretty picture, but nonetheless it's a true one. Here they all are taking their observations, and it's worse than it looks. It says, without a pre-measurement, it's difficult to identify the effect of an experimental treatment. At this Cincinnati research facility, each subject's natural body scent is being judged prior to the testing of a deodorant formulation. So not only do you have to do this once, you've got to do it twice and then be able to tell the difference. If you still want to know why I became a quantitative marketer rather than a behavioural marketer, I don't think I can help you. So what I want to do in the hour or so I have at my disposal is I want to talk very quickly about what I think brand equity is and why it's valuable. And I want to move from there and say, you know, brands are like other intangibles in the firm as well. We have these brand intangibles, we have customer relationships, which are another intangible and valuable. We have these channel relationships, which are another intangible and valuable. So given we have these intangibles, how can we understand them? And in particular, as managers just have to do two things. Managers have to hang on to what they've got, in other words, defence, and managers have to get more, In other words, grow the business. So how can we use these weapons, the brands, the customer relationships, the channel relationships, how can we use these weapons at our disposal to hang on to what we've got, to defend our turf, and to get more turf to grow? So I want to talk about growth and defence. I want to use a fairly old but very, very useful framework to do that, the Ansoff matrix. And then I want to talk about how we can maximise the value in each of these before I talk about the implications, firstly, for how we plan, what we do, and secondly, for how we measure, which is what we work out whether we've done well or not done well. So let me start by talking about what is brand equity. What does that mean? And I'll be fairly quick because most people will have some idea about brand equity, and I'm sure that David will also talk about brand equity. So let me just quickly suggest that Kevin Keller, who's one of the primary experts of brand equity, suggests that customer-based brand equity is the differential effect that knowing the brand has on the consumer's response. So if I give you a glass of cola and I ask you what you think of it, if I give you a glass of cola, the same glass, the same cola, but tell you it's Coca-Cola, then your brain will actually light up in different ways. There's actually a physiological response that brands give to us as consumers. So if brand equity, or customer-based brand equity, is the differential knowledge that the brand gives us, is it that I know that I'm flying Turkish Airlines makes me feel more comfortable, more safe, I know that I'll be well looked after, for example. That's what Turkish Airlines owns in the customer's mind. And Kevin Keller suggests that brand equity has got two parts. It's got its sources, which is what we own in the customer's mind, and its outcomes, which is what those sources enable us to do in the marketplace. And so the sources of brand equity might be things like awareness. Do people recognise our brand? Can they recall our brand? And their associations, which is what do they associate with our brands, or what are their beliefs or perceptions about our brands, and are they strong, are they favourable, and are they unique? Those things that we own in the customer's mind enable us to then do different things. People may recommend us more because they like our brand, they know a lot about it. People may regard our brand as their favourite brand because of what they associate with our brand. People may be prepared to pay more for our brand, a price premium, or we may be able to take our brand into different categories. And so, given that brand equity is what we own in the customer's mind, and that is an intangible asset for the firm, how does that relate to other intangible assets that we have? So we know what we have and what we can do with it. We can now think, well, brand equity, what we own in the customer's mind, is one of three major marketing assets we have, which is firstly our brand, which is what we do. Secondly, our supply chain management or channels, which is how we do it. And then thirdly, our customer relationship management, which is to whom we do it. And these are the three major marketing assets that we have to measure. And the question I've got is, when you people think about your brand, and you're proud of your brand, you like your brand, and you expect to earn revenues from your brand going forwards, how do you think about where we can take what we own in the customer's mind, and where can we exploit it and use it to keep what we've got, defence, and to get more? So, as I say, managers only have two challenges ahead of them. If we're a manager in the current position in that graph in time, and we're going along with a certain level of share or profit or revenue, and we're moving forwards, you might forecast that, let me just see whether I can, yeah. You might forecast that moving forwards, we might just keep on track, and our forecast would be that we'll keep on going. But that won't happen because there are threats in the environment, and in fact, if we don't cover those threats, then we'll start going downhill, and so we need to put strategies in place to actually make sure we hang on to what we've got. The first line in the Hippocratic Oath for doctors is first do no harm. In other words, how can you make sure that you hang on to what you've got? Defence. And major firms are very bad at doing this. You don't go to your manager and say to her, you know, I've worked out how I won't lose market share next year. She'll say, of course you have. So we don't spend time, especially market leaders, we don't spend enough time thinking about defence. But even if we do defend what we've got to get more and we've got to have opportunities. So the manager's only two jobs in this world are to get profitable defence and earnings, maintain our earnings, and then to get more. And so how can we use our brands to actually hang on to what we've got, our defence, and to get more? And so firstly, if we think about what we're doing today, our existing products in our existing markets. Most of you will have heard of the product life cycle, and that is that the sales of a product are not generally static or stationary or still. They go through a cycle where at the introduction they're small, they start growing, they reach some level of maturity, which could go for a long time, and then they decline. And so a lot of marketers believe in the product life cycle. Some people don't believe in the product life cycle. But that's a very bad question. The question not is, do we believe in the product life cycle or not? The question is, what's driving the product life cycle? Because once we work out what's driving the product life cycle, then as managers, we can actually influence it. We can make sure we do get growth. We can make sure that when we get to maturity, this is as high up as we can possibly make it. We can make sure that we do try and stall decline and make sure that decline doesn't happen. And so if your job is defence and growth, what are the challenges in our existing product markets, what we're doing today with our brands, that will enable us to keep on going? And I want to introduce the idea of persistence. So earnings persistence, if we think of the profit that we're getting in a period, so this little pi t is the profit that we're getting in a period. If we compare the profit we're getting in a period to the profit we got in the previous period, if we get more profit in this period than the previous period, then our persistence of earnings is going to go up. If we get less profit in this period to our previous periods, our persistence is going to be less than 1 and it's going to go down. And so you can see that where we're growing, our earnings tomorrow are greater than our earnings today, so our persistence is greater than 1 here. When we get to maturity, our persistence is 1, our earnings tomorrow are the same as our persistence today, and then when we get into decline, we get less money tomorrow than we got today, and so on. And so how can we actually use this for defence and growth? Well, firstly, for defence, the two challenges for defence are, there are only two challenges, which is, can we keep on getting these earnings, these profits, longer and longer and push this product life cycle out further? And the second one is, even when we reach decline, quite often there's still some residual share left. So as managers, your job with your brands is, even if your brand is in decline, can you slow that decline? And can you make sure that it doesn't decline to 0, but it declines to some very nice profitable amount? So to give you two examples, one example with BMW came to me and they said, John, when we announced the 7 Series, everyone stops buying the new 7 Series, everyone stops buying the old 7 Series. And so the product life cycle of the old 7 Series is actually driven by the announcement of the new one. And they said to me, can you help us and explain to us how we can actually delay this product life cycle and push it out further? And one of the things we came up with was this pre-certification program. If you buy an old model, a new old model 7 Series, then if you're going to trade it in, if it's not going to lose any of its value, then in fact I'll be more inclined to buy an old 7 Series than I would before. And BMW got into the used car market purely because it wanted to push out these income streams and earn the profit for longer and longer. So we can try and extend our product life cycle so we don't have to decline as quickly as we would before. The other thing we can do is, even when we do get decline, we'll still probably keep some customers. And how can we maximise the residual share that we get from that? So when the Japanese launched the quartz watch movement, a lot of Swiss companies tried to keep their share and here's an advertisement for Blancpain watches. Since 1735, there has never been a quartz Blancpain watch, and there never will be. So Blancpain, the Swiss watch industry, decided we're going to lose a lot of share to the quartz movement from Japan, but we will try and make the value of the share that we keep as big as profitable, and we'll just keep on making that share indefinitely. So you've got a brand. Firstly, protect it. Protect it by making sure that the income streams keep going for as long as possible, and even if they do decline, make sure that they decline to a high level, not to a low level. That's the challenge for defence, and we know quite a lot about how to defend our brands. To defend our brands, we should look at the sources of attack. Who's going to attack us? And we better have good competitive intelligence. Once we understand where we'll get attacked, we have to understand the asymmetries in the market. Where are we better than our competitor? Where is our competitor better than us? And work out where we can defend ourselves, and then we develop a winning strategy. And so if we're attacked, we can have a winning strategy by having a better position. We can try and outflank our attacker. We can move before our attacker preemptively. We can have some other counteroffensive. We could have a dynamic attack where we attack mobile in different ways, or we could run away and play a different game. And this is based on some work that I published in the Harvard Business Review about 7 years ago as to how we can continue to defend our brands. So the first thing, the doctor's first line, first do no harm. You have these wonderful brand assets, work out how you're going to defend them. Then, of course, you've got to work out how you're going to grow them. And we can grow them in 3 different ways. The first way we've got to grow them is how can we get the money early? How can we speed up the diffusion process so that people buy our brands earlier and earlier, our new products earlier and earlier, and how can we accelerate the diffusion process? The second challenge is how can we grow the product life cycle? In other words, how, when we get to equilibrium, how can we have more and more and more people buying our brands? How can we grow the product life cycle? And then perhaps the third challenge for growth is how can we reduce the volatility or the cyclicality, the up and down movements of our product life cycle. So to give you some examples, this is a picture of Whoopi Goldberg just buying her first iPhone. Apple does a fantastic job of accelerating their product life cycles. Apple has people waiting outside the store when they launch their new product. And Apple has done a really terrific job of getting these income streams early. So if you do use your brands to launch new products, how can you make sure that that diffusion process happens earlier than later? Next, Coca-Cola does a fantastic job in terms of growing the product life cycle. Coca-Cola tries to make sure that everyone who drinks Coca-Cola can have access to it anytime, at any place. Coca-Cola's motto used to be within an arm's length. In other words, I'm always within an arm's length of a Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola's done a fantastic job of actually getting Coke drinkers to drink Coke more and more and more often. And then how can we reduce the volatility? So this is the logo of the Aspen Institute in Colorado in the United States. The Aspen, of course, is a great ski resort. So that means there's all of the summer that is not being used for. So if we can reduce the volatility of earnings by, during the summer when people aren't skiing, we'll actually have an educational institution, and so that we reduce the volatility of the earnings by getting earnings through the summer rather than just getting them during the winter and reduce the volatility. So we've got our brands. We're going to keep getting those rents, those earnings for as long as possible. Even if we lose some of them, we're going to try and get the residual value of the earnings as much as possible. We're going to try and accelerate them and get them as early as possible. We're going to try and grow them and get them as big as possible. And we're going to try and reduce the volatility because accountants and finance people don't like volatility. So that's in a summary, how we might want to grow what we're doing today. What we're doing with our existing products in our existing markets. But let's think about what we might want to do beyond our existing products and our existing markets. It may well be that we should have new products and new product categories, and we should have new markets and new geographies. And Igor Anzov suggested that there are really 4 ways to grow. We can grow in our existing products with our existing markets, which is what we've been talking about. But we can actually launch new products for our existing markets by product development. Or we could actually take our existing products and move them into new markets. Or we could actually develop new products for new markets. And this has actually been extended a little bit by David Archer, who said we can actually move beyond that. So Archer still talked about new products and new markets, and existing markets and new markets. He still talked about existing products and new products, but he added another dimension and said we can actually vertically integrate too and provide more of what we do. Let's compare this to Srivastava's market-based assets that I spoke to you about before. Remember I said, Raj Srivastava said, you own 3 things in intangibles. You own your brands and your products, you own your customers and your customer relationships, and you own your supply chains and your channels. And so Archer suggests you can use your brands to actually grow into new markets, to actually grow new products, to actually get into new channels. And so how can we use our brands to leverage new products, exploiting the associations of our brands? How can we use our brands to actually get into a new market? Or how can we use our brands to create value in the channel? So to give you an example of new products, Arm & Hammer is a baking soda in the United States. People in America are very busy, they're baking less and less. So Arm & Hammer was very surprised that its sales weren't going down, they were going up, given people were baking less. They found out that people were using baking soda to put in their refrigerator so that to get rid of the smells in the refrigerator. Baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, is an oxidant, so it absorbs the odours. And so when they found that out, they launched, given people were using this baking soda to put in their fridge, they did the sensible thing and they launched a new product, fridge and freezer deodorant, so that they could exploit this new product, which the brand Arm & Hammer had associations with being able to do. I went to Brazil a few years ago and went up the Amazon. As I was being rowed up the Amazon, 150 kilometres away from the nearest store, I came across someone doing their washing. And here they were doing their washing with a pack of Omo, 150 miles from the nearest store. The multinationals have done a fantastic job of taking their existing and present products and brands and taking them into new markets. Or alternatively, we can vertically integrate. So Federal Express thought, we don't want to be a freight delivery company, we want to be an office services company. So Federal Express took over Kinko's, which is a copying service in America, and Federal Express vertically integrated into Kinko's. So you've got these brand assets. How are you going to exploit them into new products, into new markets, and through new channels? Because you're the custodians of them. So we're going to try and get as much income in our present markets, with our present channels, with our present products as we can, but we're also going to laterally grow as well. So let's think about growth beyond the core. Let's think about growth beyond the products and the markets that we're doing at the moment. So if we do want to expand beyond our current activities, beyond our existing products, beyond our existing markets, beyond our existing channels, we can do it by launching new products, entering new markets, or developing new channels. How do we work out, is that a good thing to do with our brand or not? Well, the amount that we're going to earn from any new opportunity is the size of that opportunity times our share that we're going to get from that opportunity. So should, for example, Turkish Airlines enter the market, the travel market to Australia, putting regulatory considerations to one side? Well, is the Australian market a big market? How big is the market? And what is the market power, or what brand equity does Turkish Airlines have to bring to the Australian market? And we can think of the size of the opportunity, the size of the market, by how big is this market going to be in equilibrium, and how close, how well developed is this market? we can think of the share that we're going to get in this market by how strong is the firm, what brand equity has the firm got, multiplied by, is that brand equity really going to be useful in this new market or category or not? Is there some fit of the strength of the brand? And so if we look at Starbucks coffee, for example, Starbucks coffee could think about entering China. China's market is at a very, very early stage of development in terms of coffee. Not many Chinese people have coffee, so it's not attractive in terms of the stage of development, but it's very attractive in terms of the fact that no one else is competing for coffee. And so Starbucks has got the opportunity to really do quite well in the Chinese market if they can develop it. If you think of Starbucks coffee in Spain, Starbucks coffee has also entered Spain, the Spanish market is very developed, which is great, but of course it's also very, very competitive too. And so Starbucks in Europe is having terrible trouble because although the markets are very big and very well developed, the relative strength of Starbucks actually is quite low in Europe. And Starbucks is finding it's much easier to actually be strong in an underdeveloped market than to be weak in a highly developed market. But when you think of your opportunities in growth beyond the core, in growth beyond your existing products and existing markets, then the sorts of where you're going to get high earnings are where the opportunity is big and your ability to take advantage of that opportunity is also substantial. Let me move from talking in marketing terms to talking in financial terms. What does this mean in terms of money? Well, what it means in terms of money is that if we're thinking about what we do today, our existing markets, which we're in at the moment, and our existing products that we're in our market, so this is our business today. How much is our brand worth given our business today, given what we do at the moment, and given where we do it? Then the value of our brands is just the expected net present value of the earnings that we'll get from that. But of course we might do new products, and that gives us market leverage. We leverage off the market and our brands to actually develop new products. And if we add up how much we're going to get from what we do today, together with how much we're going to do with what we could do tomorrow in our existing markets, this is what we call in marketing our customer equity. This is the value of our existing markets, what we earn given what we're doing to those markets today, plus what we will earn given what we're going to do to those markets tomorrow. So this is the value of market equity or customer equity. This is the value of given what we're doing today, how much earnings we're going to get out of that in the future, discounted by the time value of money and risk. We can look vertically as well. With our existing products, we can think about how much money we're going to make out of those products in our current markets, but we can also think about how much money we would make if we entered new markets and the product leverage, and if we add up for our existing products, what we earn from our existing markets, what we'll earn from our new markets, then we end up with our brand equity as well, which is what our existing products are going to do for us. If we then think about what's new is we could develop these new products, and the value of those new products is how much they're going to get in our existing markets plus how much they'll get in new markets, and this is the value that we get from new product development. If we think about the new markets we could enter, the value of those new markets, the value that we get from our existing products, plus the value that we might get from any new products we'd launch in them, and that tells us the value, the customer acquisition value, the new customer acquisition value, how much money we're going to get, the earnings that we're going to get in our new markets. And then, of course, if you add up our brand equity, what we get from our existing products, and our new product equity, which is our NPV value, you get the value of the firm. You get the same number as if you add up the value of what we get from our current markets plus the value of what we're going to get from our future markets, you also get the value of the firm. So the point I want to make to you people is you've got these brands, you know they're good. A lot of you are monitoring those brands and working out what people believe about them. You know you're going to earn money in the future, but you ought to be able to tell me where you're going to earn that money. Are you going to earn that money by protecting your existing product markets? Are you going to earn that money by developing new products in those markets? Are you going to earn that money by entering new markets and leveraging off the products you've got, or by breaking out? And how much? Now, it's not hard to do that. And I guess my point is that I really think that you should be doing that. So I want to actually start closing, because this will help us catch up a little bit of time, I hope. I want to finish closing by talking firstly about the implications of this for what you do, and secondly, the implications of this for what you measure. So in terms of what you do, in terms of evaluating your strategies, everyone wants to know, have you done well? Let's say that the share of Pepsi goes up by 2%. Was that a good outcome or not? I don't know. And I can't know until I know how well Pepsi could have done. Maybe the share of Pepsi should have gone up by 4%. I don't know. And so we can't evaluate our marketing until we have a benchmark against which to evaluate it. Now, some people use the benchmark of last year's sales or last year's share or last year's profits. Some people use the benchmark of how well the competitors are doing. Some people use the benchmark of objectives. How well did we hope to do? But the benchmark you should be using is how well could you have done? And the whole thing about how well you could have done is you can't tell how well you could have done until you've systematically worked out what you could have done, until you've brainstormed all of the options. So one of the nice things about brand valuation is it brings creativity back into marketing where it belongs. We can't tell the value of a brand until we creatively think about everything that we could do tomorrow to protect and to grow that brand. And I think it's ironic that most people think that marketing is more creative than accounting. My partner is a professor of accounting, and so she's always thrilled when I say to her that, in this area, you accountants are actually much, much more sophisticated than us marketers. The accountants talk about what they call the investment opportunity set. In other words, what could this firm do with the intangible assets it has at its disposal? As marketers, we have to, before we can value our brands, we have to systematically identify the investment opportunity set, because that's what determines whether how much income we're going to get from our brands in the future. And so with our strategy cannot be complete until we've looked at all the things that the firm can do to protect what it's got and to go out and to get more. There are also some implications for what we measure. And so marketing metrics is a very, very popular subject at the moment, but most marketing metrics are operational. And what I mean by operational is that most marketing metrics are really about turning the dials on the machine. If I advertise by 5% more, will more sausages come out the other end of the machine? Will I get more sales? If I advertise a little bit less, will I actually get just as many sausages and I'll save some money on advertising? So most of our marketing metrics are very, very operational. To look at brand value, we need marketing metrics that are strategic. What do I mean by strategic marketing metrics? Strategic marketing metrics are the metrics about where do we compete, with what products, for what customers, using what channels, and what resources do we need to have that competition. So let me give you an example of one strategic metric. Some firms use these strategic metrics. At 3M has got an objective that at least 25% of their earnings, of their profits, in 3 years' time will come from products that don't exist today. So they've got this metric, the strategic metric, if you look at the Ansoff matrix that I showed you, which says we've got our existing products, we've got our new products, and we want at least 25% of our earnings or profits to come from that column, which is the new product column, as opposed to the existing product column. Because 3M is all about innovation, and 3M wants to think that they're going to go and get their money by developing more and more new valuable products. So they've got a minimum of 25% of revenue from new products. Procter & Gamble has got a maximum of 30% from new products. In other words, Procter & Gamble says we want no more than 30% of our earnings in 5 years' time to come from new products. Why is that? Because they think with Fairy washing up liquid, with Charmin toilet paper, toilet tissue, with Crest toothpaste, they've got all these wonderful brand assets, and if they're getting too much from new products, they're actually not exploiting their original brands as well. And so here one says I want a minimum of 25% from new products, the other one says I want a maximum of 30%. The interesting question is, what's the right answer? And of course, the right answer is basically, comes out of this analysis. You should get as much money from new products, new channels, new markets, as the opportunity dictates. If you're Google, Google has got so much opportunity to grow in the existing search market. Maybe Google should actually be getting quite a lot of its profits from new markets. If you were Kodak, Kodak Films, 10 years ago, you should have said, look, existing products for existing markets, we're going to die. Of course, as Kodak did. And so Kodak had this imperative that we better get 90% of our earnings from new products, or from new markets won't do it, actually. It's got to be new products. Kodak's got this great brand name, and we better work out how we can leverage the brand name into new products, because our current products are dying. So your strategic metrics come from the analysis, they don't go into the analysis. What sort of strategic metrics should we have? The sort of strategic metrics we might want to think about in terms of outcomes, what we achieve. We might want to think about time to money. I'm going to launch a new product. How long is it going to be before it's cash flow positive? They might be things like revenue persistence. I've got these great products in these great markets. How much earnings will I be getting from each of them in the next 1, 2, 3 years relevant to today? What percentage of revenue do I want from new products? What percentage of revenue do I want from new customers? What percentage of revenue do I want from diversification? There are lots of outcome variables that you should be measuring to work out where you want your business strategically to be tomorrow. And that will influence the value of your brands. You might want strategic metrics about efficiency of conversion. So, for example, you might look at your share of voice, which is what percentage of the advertising in the category is yours relative to what percentage of the revenue in the category is yours. Are you getting your fair share of revenue given how much you're advertising? We might want to think about strategic metrics in terms of balance of the portfolio. Am I covering the markets and customer bases that I want to cover? Do I have too much overlap or cannibalization? So these strategic metrics, once we work out where do we want to win, in terms of defence, keeping our existing product market revenues, in terms of new products, in terms of new markets, in terms of new channels, and what mix do we want, they come out once we develop what the opportunities are. So if I had to summarise the message that I've been trying to communicate, we have this wonderful asset called brand equity. It's important, it gives us profits tomorrow, it gives us defence tomorrow, but before we can defend it, we have to understand it. What does it mean in the customer's mind? And then we can work out where it can be attacked and the weapon we have to defend it with. Before we can grow it, we have to work out what its potential is in new and existing markets, how big are those markets, and what will our brand do for us in those markets, and what won't our brand do for us in those markets and channels. We know how to do this stuff. We have some very good techniques to do this stuff, and once we've identified all of the strategic options we've got, we can set strategic metrics against which to measure them. I want to close, because I've still got a couple of minutes, I want to close by giving you an example which I quite like, which shows about where you can take your brand and where you can't take your brand. There used to be one match manufacturing plant in Australia. The brand was called Redheads. And so here you can see these Redhead matches. They were made in Australia, and it was very much an Australian iconic product, a very strong Australian brand. Redheads was hit by a triple whammy. Firstly, there was a flood of Asian matches into Australia. Secondly, a lot of people stopped smoking, and so they didn't need as many matches. And thirdly, people started using disposable cigarette lighters as opposed to using matches. So any one of those would have been a disaster, but redheads had this triple disaster of the imports, people stopping smoking, and the disposable cigarette lighters. And so the CEO of Redheads knew that the strength of this company was it had a lot of trees. It had all these forests, and given they had this strength, they thought, how can we leverage this strength to make more money? So they said, the CEO said, we're trying to hunt out a product that will take up a lot of trees. But until we come across something, there is no point in putting more trees in the ground. So given that their strength was the wood that they had, given people didn't seem to want their matches very much, they thought, well, gosh, we better try and defend the revenue streams we've got, and we certainly won't incur any costs because we can't make money out of these trees. Then they realised the company's biggest strength was not the forests they had. The company's biggest strength was the redhead. The company's biggest strength was the brand. Once they realised their biggest strength was the brand, they stopped making matches. Now all they make is money. And so they started integrating into a whole host of other products. Not only did they now make matches, and all sorts of matches, big matches, small matches, any sort of matches, but they moved into firelighters as well to start barbecues. They moved into these little gas starters. They moved into disposable cigarette lighters. And now, all made in Sweden, not made in Australia anymore, but now this redhead is making them a huge amount of money because they've realised that the brand actually has got this amazing potential. Because the brand is all about fire, the brand has got this amazing potential not just to make them a lot of money in matches, but fire lighters, gas lighters, disposable cigarette lighters, barbecued charcoal, etc. They did very, very well. Now, of course, marketers never know when to stop. And so I wrote to them. I wrote to them when they did this. And I said, this is wonderful. Can you send me some examples of your marketing? Well, they sent me enough matches to start 4 forest fires. It was a great example. But did they stop there? No, they didn't. Then this was so successful, now they decided, we're going to use the redhead and we're going to have dishwashing tablets, we're going to have laundry detergent, we're going to have etc. You can imagine how well this went. So I wrote to them and I said, this is a really interesting campaign. I used the word interesting rather than good. This is a really interesting campaign. Can you send me some examples of your marketing? I never heard back from them, and so I went to the supermarket myself and I bought all the products, and of course this was a terrible failure. So when you think about your brands, you've got to think about, and their brand value, you've got to think about where you can take them and where you can't take them. And with respect to the redhead, this redhead is fire. This redhead is dangerous. This redhead you can take anywhere where fire goes, but you can't take her into the kitchen. She's not that kind of girl. So on that note, I'd like to thank you very much, and I look forward to questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Congratulations. Evet, biraz dinlenelim. Bir çay kahve molamız var. Daha sonra David'in sunumuyla baş başayız.
Türkiye dahil 20 ülkede faaliyet gösteren ve geçtiğimiz günlerde Türkiye'nin en değerli markaları listesini açıklayan Marka Değerlendirme Kuruluşu Brand Finance'ın Akbank ve Türk Telekom'un katkılarıyla İstanbul'da düzenlediği Brand Finance Forum, Türkiye'de hesaplanabilir pazarlama ve marka değerleri konusunu gündeme taşıyor. 8 Kasım Perşembe günü, yani bugün saat 10 gibi başladığı konuşmalar 16'ya kadar devam etmesi bekleniyor. Sakıp Sabancı Müzesi The Seed salonundayız. Brand Finance CEO'su David Hay, Özyeğin Üniversitesi Pazarlama Profesörü Ken Powles, Australian National University ve London Business School'da pazarlama profesörü olan John Roberts ve Brand Finance Türkiye Direktörü Muhterem İlgüner konuyla ilgili içerikleri gündeme taşımaya başladılar. Az önce de söylediğim gibi Sayın Muhterem İlgüner ve Profesör John Roberts konuşmalarını az önce yaptılar. Şimdi oturumun ikinci kısmı başlayacak sevgili izleyiciler. Biz küçük bir ara verdik. Oturumun ikinci kısmıyla sizlerle birlikte olmaya devam edeceğiz.
Değerli konuklar, bu bölümde Brand Finance CEO'su David Haig konuşacak. Dear David, invite you. Yes, okay.
Thank you. Hello. It's very nice to be back in Istanbul again. Sadly, I seem to have brought the rain this time from London. I assumed that it was only ever sunny in Turkey, so you've let me down, I'm afraid. I was asked to talk on this subject, marketing accountability, strategic brand valuation as a tool to determine marketing budgets, which is a bit of a mouthful, really. I think in the end, when it comes to most commercial things, when we are talking about strategic, what we're really talking about is how can we actually end up making more money? And in the end, it is about making profits and increasing shareholder value that this whole presentation is about. First of all, I'd like to show you a chart which comes from a study that Brand Finance does every year, where we accumulate the value of all companies on all stock markets worldwide. We then look to their balance sheets and we add up the value of the tangible assets in their balance sheets, and that's the grey piece at the bottom there, the dark grey piece. We look at their balance sheets and look at assets that have been acquired in acquisitions, intangible assets that have been acquired in acquisitions. So under the accounting rules now, when you make an acquisition, you don't just put in goodwill, you are expected to identify the individual intangible assets that you have acquired, whether they are trademarks or brands, or whether they are patents, or whether they are copyrights. And the light grey piece is the aggregate value of those assets which have been acquired and put into balance sheets under the International Financial Reporting Standard 3, which has been here since about 2004. The red piece is the difference arising in acquisitions, which is known as goodwill. Some people might say that that's actually quite a large proportion, the red, compared with the specific intangibles. And that's largely, I think, because many acquisitions have happened at an overvalue. And when you actually decompose them, you find that the real assets acquired are not as much as maybe the price of the acquisition said. However, we'll move on from that once. You can see there that the balance sheets of all the companies in the world have tangible assets, acquired intangibles, and acquired goodwill. And the green piece is the extra value that the stock markets attribute to those companies over and above what's in their balance sheet. Now, the thing you'll see here is that the aggregate value of all companies marched ahead from a dip at the beginning of 2002 to a high in 2007, and then dropped off a cliff when the current recession began. It recovered, and this, I haven't got the current results on this slide, but it actually dropped again during 2011 as we went into the second phase of the recession in America and Europe. So it's what you might call a roller coaster of value. Expressing that in percentage terms, you can see that throughout most of the 2000 period, the amount of value represented by intangible assets in balance sheets worldwide was approximately 60 to 65%. First of all, that demonstrates the importance of brands and other intangibles, and why marketing people need to focus on trying to maximize that value. It's dropped back, but even now it's somewhere in the order of 40% and is rising back towards the higher number. Now, what this shows is that, generally speaking, markets don't fully understand the companies, they don't understand their prospects, and they don't understand the assets that they operate. And you see frequently, anecdotally, where individual companies are taken over, that they were misvalued by the markets and are taken over cheaply because the markets did not understand what the assets were that they owned. For example, when Cadbury's was taken over by Kraft a couple of years ago, I think the general consensus in Britain was that Kraft got a bargain because the Cadbury share price was very low as a result of the recession and a lack of understanding amongst financial investors as to what they really owned. And they regretted the fact, I believe, that they had not done more to let the markets know what their brand portfolio was worth, because if they had, they might be independent today. So the point is that investors generally are hungry for information to understand what are the true values of the things that they are trading on these stock markets. And this is a definition of investor relations from the American National Investor Relations Institute, where they say that investor relations is a strategic corporate marketing activity combining the disciplines of finance and communication, which provides present and potential investors with an accurate portrayal of a company's performance and prospects. When conducted effectively, investor relations can have a positive effect on a company's total value relative to that of the overall market and a company's cost of capital. My view is that that is absolutely correct, that properly conducted investor relations and explanation of what's owned does make a difference. It doesn't necessarily prevent a share price going down if the market is going down. The important word here is relative. So relative to the changes in the market, if you are communicating well and explaining what you own, you will do better and avoid those kind of Cadbury situations. Now, the two things I've highlighted here are strategic corporate marketing activity, because I think most marketing people do not believe that it is their role to be involved in this kind of thing. They believe it is their role to be an internal function helping to optimize operational things that John was talking about in the last session. I don't think they look strategically enough at what they are doing. Now, in London, we work with a number of marketing directors who actually are habitually taken along to investor relations presentations. There's one guy called Martin Glenn who used to work at Pepsi, very dynamic character, and as a result of being extremely good with the city and investors, he was actually made CEO of Igloo, which is Igloo Birdseye, which is a frozen foods company. It's now a multi-billion company. He regularly goes to the city to persuade them to give him money to make accretive acquisitions, and he is a marketing guy. Secondly, I highlighted the term accurate portrayal. Where it comes to any of this, I think the word accurate is slightly spurious. Sometimes people think that profit and loss accounts and valuation results are absolutely accurate and scientific. For me, the best word to use is persuasive or reasonable. Because what you're trying to do is to demonstrate to a potential investor what a thing is worth. And a lot of that is about perceptions. And a lot of it is about future perceptions. So we're dealing with future perceptions where it comes to the valuation of companies. Inevitably, that has to be a preserve for marketing people, in my opinion. Now, I've put up here a slide from an academic in the States called Bob Eccles. And he has been running a campaign to talk about a reporting revolution to try and get across the information that I am talking about to investors so they can make more informed decisions. You'll see here that he's saying the pinnacle of his temple of reporting is public trust and investor confidence. You've got to believe in the stuff that's being given to you. And his view is that there are three pillars of that. One is people of integrity. Two is a culture of accountability. And three is a spirit of transparency, which I think most sane people would say, surely that is self-evident. Unfortunately, with a lot of this, it is not, and certainly in the last 5 years, has been demonstrated not to be self-evident in many, many large companies. And he had a number of plinths that he said this should be built on. One was principles-based global accounting standards, which to most people is deeply boring. But the reality is we now have a body of global. You'll notice here, by the way, that the date of this book was 2002. And I specifically dragged it out because he was talking about this in the wake of the scandals at the beginning of 2000s. So, for example, Enron, Merrill Lynch, WorldCom, a variety of major scandals where investors were cheated and lied to. And so this was supposed to be a whole new dawn of the way we communicated with people to give them fair and accurate information. And I brought it in because I find it slightly ironic that here we are 10 years later, more or less asking for the same things because, largely speaking, it has been ignored. The one thing which has definitely been introduced is global accounting standards. He then said that you needed additional industry-based performance information so that people could understand for themselves what was going on. Thirdly, improved external reporting beyond the requirements. Many companies do not give away anything more than they have to. And there are valid reasons for that, like giving information to the competition, but it makes it very difficult for sensible investors to form a view as to whether or not these companies are worth what they say they're worth. Thirdly, enhanced performance reporting and analysis using the internet. Fifthly, having true and fair accounts from auditors, which again you would say is self-evident. At the time he wrote this, it was not. And he pointed out the fact that most audit firms received more money in other fees than they received in their audit fees. And there were numerous instances where they were actually bending the results that were going out to the investors for self-interested reasons. And it was as a result of that that they all divested their management consultancy divisions, well, with the exception of Deloitte, who decided to hang on to theirs, but the other three divested them. Interestingly, over the last 10 years during the boom, they've all regrown them again. So they're actually back to square one again, in my opinion. And they say they are not, but I'm not sure that's true. And the final one is to strengthen corporate reporting supply chain links, which sounds like gobbledygook to me, but basically it is just giving more information in a more digestible form so that people can understand what these things are worth. So there you go, his temple of mammon, or temple of good reporting that will help people. And I thought it was great when I read it 10 years ago, and I think it's great now. Sadly, it hasn't necessarily come true. Now, the framework that he laid out, which again is just as relevant today as it was then, is this. First of all, it all starts with transparency. You've got to have a philosophy of transparency and willingness to share. I frequently go into companies where you talk to the finance director and you say, "Can I see your P&L?" And he says, "No, we don't show that sort of thing to marketing people." And then you talk to the marketing guy and you say, "Do you have any idea what profit your brand makes?" And they go, "No, they won't show us the numbers." And regularly that happens, all sorts of reasons. In the same way that there is secrecy about divulging information to external markets, there seems to be a culture of secrecy in many companies about even telling their own people what's going on. So is it any surprise that you suddenly discover that people are chasing sales even if they're loss-making, and actually they're destroying value, not creating value? It's an insult to the intelligence of marketing people and demonstrates a fundamental problem in many companies that they won't be transparent. It happened the other day, actually, with a major company where they basically said to us, "If you want to do this brand valuation, David, I suggest you go to the equity analysts in the city and get the financial figures that they've got, because they're more or less right, and use them to tell us what we should do, rather than getting our internal ones." So transparency is crucial. Secondly, identifying the key financial and non-financial value drivers and relationships between them. Looking at any business and trying to say what a brand does to it or what marketing does to it is utterly pointless if you do not understand the fundamental drivers of how that business works. And I'll come back to that later on. You must understand how the business works. Thirdly, developing necessary measurement technologies and IT systems, which again sounds like a statement of the obvious. 10 years on, I still don't think we're anywhere near there. People are always talking about how they're going to create a reporting and scorecard system, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. And they quite often get us involved. And very often these projects turn into a joke for the same reasons that I mentioned about divulging information. You get in there and you discover there is a silo mentality where it's almost impossible to get people to cooperate with each other and provide information. Next is transparent internally to facilitate value-creating decisions. That's a very polite way of saying what I just said a moment ago. How can you possibly make a value-increasing decision if you don't really understand the structure of the business and the financials that go behind it? Linking compensation to that. Once again, over the last 10 years, if this theory had been applied, we might not be in the crisis we are currently in, particularly in banks. There has been a weird culture of remuneration in banks where all you have to do is get the transactions in through the door. It doesn't matter what the health of the business is. It doesn't matter whether there's a long-term return on those things. You're probably only there for 18 months before you move to the next bank. And bonuses, certainly in the UK and mainland Europe and America, totally disconnected with the long-term value-creating ability of them. And finally, distributing all that information in a variety of multimedia forms. Now, disappointingly, I don't think most of that has really happened. I think some people have tried, but I don't think as a whole it is happening. Finally, what he said was that in the ideal world, the management would disclose market overview information about the competitive environment, the regulatory environment, the macroeconomic environment, and then within that, they would say what the internal information was about the value strategy. What are they trying to do? How are they trying to, what are the goals and objectives? What's the design of the organization? How is it managed? Then on managing for value, looking at economic performance, financial risk, and particularly segmental performance. And then finally over there, going to the next level of detail to describe what are we doing on innovation, what are we doing on brands and how strong are they, customers, supply chains, etc., etc. Now that would be great. But he warned at the time that one of the key issues would be consistency and integrity of data and trend data. I would wholly endorse what he said. Because once again, you very often go into companies and discover that the way that they are measuring things chops and changes from year to year. And finally, the independence of the reporting entity. Who is actually making sure that this information is not bent, basically? Now, once again, I suppose I've probably been in this industry too long, really. You see too many things. But frequently, you are asked to do brand valuations because someone thinks they're doing well. And basically they want a valuation or an analysis, and they might even put it in their annual report, either because they're looking for a job, or they're looking for a big bonus or a pay rise or something, or a promotion. They don't really want long-term reporting of this information, because what if it goes backwards? Things go down as well as up. And so I often think it's very selective. People want to put this measurement in when they think things are going well. They don't want to put it in there for long-term management to make sure the decisions continue to be made sensibly. So there's my cynicism, probably coming from the fact that I'm in the UK where we are surrounded by cynicism. There's been a total collapse in trust in organizations. I don't know whether you may or may not be familiar with this company called Barclays. Barclays is one of the biggest banks in the UK, and this was going all around the internet. The interesting thing, I think, if we look 10 years on from Bob Eccles' recipe for improved performance, was that in those days, it was quite easy for companies to hide things. Most communications was outbound in the form of advertising. Nowadays, it is absolutely stirred up and accentuated by one-to-one communication via the internet. You cannot escape the internet anymore. But, looking at it in reverse, it actually creates a huge opportunity for challenger brands, which Turkey has got many of, with brands that don't have huge resources but do have the required integrity. And it's not just corporate brands that have a problem. If you actually look at just about every sector, we had the Olympics in London this year. It was quite amusing. there was an article in the marketing press, I don't know whether anybody read it, from a firebrand, I think is the polite way of describing him, called Mark Ritson, who is now at the University of New South Wales, Melbourne University, who is a business school professor down there, who I think he's an academic that doesn't waste his time on research. He just likes mouthing off in the press. He writes endless, ridiculous articles where he takes very strong positions. And one of the positions he took was that no one would be a sponsor of the Olympics unless they were a crook. Because only crooks have the incentive and the profits and the desire to actually sponsor the Olympics. So he reeled out BP, because they ruined the Gulf, Dow because they poisoned everyone in India, McDonald's because they make everybody fat, Visa because they want to rip you off, etc., etc. Now, he's a bit of an idiot, frankly, in the stuff he says. He does it for extreme to try and create an argument. But the reality is this sort of stuff is whizzing around the internet the whole time. So you have to be extremely careful. So I think in most organizations, certainly in the Americas and Europe, there needs to be a serious culture change. The belief that you can do things behind closed doors and keep it all secret has gone away. You can't. If somebody outside doesn't notice what's going on and put it around the internet, somebody inside will leak the information. So I think there is much, much greater scrutiny on companies to do the right thing. And in a nutshell, I suppose you would put those four together. You've got to get your business strategy right and say how you're going to make money. You then put your marketing and brand strategy to match that. And frankly, you have to bring marketing and brand people into the discussion about business strategy. We did a rather amusing project for Shell about 6 or 7 years ago, which they called Project Qi, which means energy in Chinese. And we were asked to participate with the whole brand and marketing team to develop the ongoing forward strategy for Shell. And the first question that somebody asked, well, one of the consultants actually asked, was, so what's the business strategy that we are going to do this brand strategy on? And they said, well, we don't know. They haven't told us. And nobody knew whether their intention was to get out of retail downstream, whether it was to go into nuclear, whether they wanted to go for renewables. Nobody had a clue what their business strategy was. And yet we were supposed to sit in a room and talk about what the brand strategy for Shell would be. I think they kind of realized how stupid that was, and they suspended the thing until they were prepared to actually divulge what the business strategy was. Anyway, so the behavior, the culture within the organization then needs to be consistent with that, and then it needs to be communicated consistently to stakeholders. Okay, I'm putting him up because he's one of our clients and he's a pretty good bloke, I think. He's done a few things wrong in the past, but I think you wouldn't find someone who was a multi-billionaire who hadn't done a few things wrong, like, for example, not always paying his tax. However, generally speaking, I think he is actually admirable. And he does what he says he's going to do. He says he breaks his empire up into small pieces, and there are now something like 400 companies trading under the Virgin name, and he breaks them up into pieces specifically because he wants them to be small enough so that people understand and feel empowered and are part of what's going on. He says big organizations just get completely out of control and nobody knows what's going on and they're riven with politics. Now, maybe that's a rationalization of the fact that most of his businesses are small, but actually some of them are now quite big. Virgin Atlantic is seriously challenging British Airways. And in the old days, it was one plane against the dark empire. Now he is virtually their equal. And what he says is, Virgin has a promise based on 5 factors: value for money, quality, reliability, innovation, and fun. That's what they do. And he says, at Virgin, we know that the brand name means, and when we put our brand name on something, we're making a promise. It's a promise we've always kept and always will. Harder work keeping promises than making them, but there's no secret formula. And Virgin sticks to its principles and keeps its promises. Now, obviously he say that because he runs the company. I think there are instances where they've deviated slightly from their principles, but I think broadly speaking, it's true. And they have a very flat structure and everyone can talk to this guy. You know, you walk into their office in West London, he lives around the corner and he's always in, you know. Sometimes you might not even realize it was him. You think some tramps walked in off the street. But he genuinely believes it and he pushes it forward. And if you don't, you can't get the organization working effectively. So all companies should have a Richard Branson, basically. And when you have one, the company can make a promise to the customer and enable the staff, and the staff then deliver the promise. It's sort of not rocket science, really, is it? How many companies do you go into where the bloke in charge has not communicated the strategy, won't divulge the information, and is it then any surprise that you see the people sitting around at the desk going, well, I don't know what's going on, and I don't really care? Because in the end, the brand via the people are there to communicate with all these audiences, and that is how brands create value. So now I'll move on to the boring bit, the valuation piece. I think there is a huge, before I move on, there is a huge opportunity, in my opinion, for Turkey. And I've had various conversations in the past, and I've been having them today and yesterday. Turkey is brilliant at making things, you know, original products, agricultural products, manufactured products, all manner of different things. Turkey is brilliant at it. It has very strong brands that are strong in Turkey, because Turkey, I think, likes using its own brands, and there's a homegrown thing about Turkey. There are not, it's quite notable coming to Turkey, there are not that many foreign brands in desperate, clarity here. You don't see the same dominance of the Nikes and the Starbucks and the Cokes and so on as you do elsewhere. I mean, they're obviously here, but you don't see it as much. There are far more local brands. The real challenge for Turkey is it hasn't really had enough brands going outbound. And I think it ought to be able to, because brands grow from their fundamental ability to do things well, and it's then expressing it and communicating it in an appealing way to other audiences. Turkey should be generating a lot more brands on the global stage than it is, in my view. Anyway, so if you believe that brands affect each of the different stakeholder groups, and you look carefully to see if you favorably affect people, it's going to have an effect on their behavior. It's just common sense. The real question is, can we reliably measure it and demonstrate what effect it will have on the business model? And that's our challenge. Our challenge as valuers and consultants is to demonstrate that if you have captivated these people with brand equity, that they will do things that are beneficial to your business model. So you do get higher volume sales, you do get higher prices from customers, you get more reliable, harder working, more motivated staff, you get suppliers that want to do business with you, and you get financiers who feel that there is merit in giving you money at a discount, all of which then adds value. Now, here's me, I'm quoting myself now. I thought I would just tell you what my view is about brand equity. Brand equity, for me, it's a measure of brand preference and the willingness of individuals to express that preference by making economic decisions that are favorable to the organization. It's as simple as that. Some of them will buy the brand, some of them will distribute the brand, some of them will work for the brand, some of them will lend or invest in the brand. They are all behavioral responses to the fact that they prefer you. Full stop. That is why Virgin is so successful. At a personality level, people just prefer Virgin. It's like one of their friends. And you know, the discussion earlier on about the Ansoff matrix, well, Virgin it seems to be an unbelievable brand that can expand into other foreign markets and into other categories with new products. And it does have failures, but it's very good at actually closing down the failures or minimizing the damage with the failures. But it's been successful in a remarkable number of businesses. And that's because it has such strong brand values. Now, the way you do all that, in my opinion, is there are lots of different measurement techniques, but one of the most important ones is understanding what are the attributes that make people go into a category. I'm in the bank category. Why? Because I want my money to be in the bank, earning a decent rate of return, with the branch that's available, with people that smile at me, I get this, that, and the other. So functionally, it has the attributes I want. Secondly, I want it to say something about me. So it has an emotional benefit. Now, recently, Virgin went heavy into banking in the UK. They are winning market shares so fast, they can't even cope with setting up the accounts. They virtually had to shut down their marketing because they were swamped by the number of people that wanted to open accounts with a Virgin bank account. At the snob end of the market, there's another brand called Coutts, which is the Queen's Bank. That says a wholly different thing. There, it's, you walk around with your checkbook, so everyone knows that you bank with the same bank as the Queen. And there are certain types of people who get off on that. They don't mind paying a lot of money because they want to say that they bank with the same bank as the Queen, whereas most people would be quite happy with the friendly service from Virgin. So there are emotional benefits, but the emotional benefits don't work unless you have the functional benefits working first. And then thirdly, what we call conduct attributes, which are you ethical, environmental, etc. Now, that last one would have been almost irrelevant 20 years ago. Now it's really quite an important thing and growing in many categories. And what you have to do with any category is look at what the attributes are that motivate customers to go to that category, measure it, and then work out which brands are doing well or badly on the key attributes that determine brand preference. That is a very big piece of quantitative research that has to be done on a pretty regular basis, and then you have to find ways of statistically analyzing it to demonstrate which are the factors that really drive demand in order that you can put your marketing resources behind the ones that you are not so good at or that you want to excel at, and you put it on the ones that influence the consumers most. Now, I can put a blob like that up on the screen and it looks simple. The reality is this is extremely complex because you have to then segment it by customer types and geographies, product areas. So there's a whole area of analysis that needs to be done to really infer what you need to do to develop demand. But, just simply speaking, what we endeavor to do at Brand Finance is look at the management resources available. How can you affect those attribute perceptions to drive preference, to drive behavior, to drive the financial value? And we usually keep scorecards of it. So if you look at consumers, there are various things you can do. What you might be doing, for example, is making a better product or a cheaper product or a more well-distributed product, or you explain it better or whatever it might be. Or if you're brilliant at all of that, it could be you're just not communicating the emotional value, so you put more money into advertising. And this is a recipe for making decisions about which attributes are you strong or weak on, and what would it cost you to move the dial on a particular attribute to change brand preference. So the measurement and the valuation process becomes a strategic marketing process. It is not just a measurement process. And it allows you to then predict how can you grow your volume, your number of customers, your prices, and so on. And in the end, if you get that right, and you have shifted people's perceptions, you basically shift the demand curve. At a given price, you will sell more, or at a lower price, at the same price, you will sell the same amount. At a higher price, you'll sell the same amount. And you can apply the same principle with financiers. You can measure what they think is important, and you can do it with each one of the stakeholder groups in order to infer what you do to optimize the behavior of that group towards you. So finally on that, I'll just end with a quote from another famous academic from the London Business School, Tim Ambler, one of our old sparring partners, who is now happily retired but still pops up every now and again. In his view, he was an accountant who went into marketing and then became a lecturer. So I don't think he was ever actually a professor, but he certainly had very interesting views about how marketing worked. And he basically said brand equity is the upstream reservoir of cash flow earned but not yet released to revenue. Now, I think that is a message which many, many CEOs need to be given by their CFOs, because I don't think many CEOs genuinely believe it. So just onto the measurement piece. First of all, with the measurement, you need to know what exactly do you mean by brand? What exactly are you measuring? And we characterize it in this way. So if Virgin is a branded enterprise with 400 separate businesses, within that, there are individual businesses like Virgin Atlantic. It's what we call the branded business. And within that, the reason we call it the branded business is because it is a business trading under a particular brand or trademark. And within that business, you can attribute value to the trademark. For me, the trademark valuation piece is normally reserved for technical valuations like tax or balance sheet, where you are obliged to put a number on it at a point in time. The really interesting thing, and the thing for marketers, is the value of the branded business and how you actually drive that value up by making the right actions. And I've described some of the ways you can do those right actions. But as an aside, I was asked, so I will tell you about the ISO. The ISO is very specifically not about valuing a branded business. It is specifically about valuing the brand within that business. Now, inevitably, certainly for us, the way that we would do that is to start by valuing the branded business and then attribute some of the value to it. So this is just a brief technical explanation of how that works, if it's helpful to you. There are 3 pieces of analysis that you have to do. First, a legal analysis to know you own the brand, which may sound silly as well, but quite often companies do not have proper legal rights over their brands. Secondly, you have to do detailed behavioral analysis to understand how strong the brand is, and then finally you put a financial value on it. The standard says you must do it on a segmented basis, and one of the reasons for that is legal rights are on a segmental basis. Trademarks are owned in geographic places for classes of business. So if you want to put a value on it, you have to put a value on the specific rights. But conveniently, that helps marketeers because marketeers do things on a segmented basis too. Right. Secondly, the research. So they expect you to look at market and consumer trends, various different types of stakeholder research, econometric modeling to find causalities, and then predictive research. One of the things it says is, be very careful to understand why you are doing the valuation. Because if you're doing a valuation for a technical reason, you probably need less due diligence than if you're using it for a commercial reason. And there are many reasons. Finally, it outlines the ways you can do it. You could look at what it would cost you what could you sell it in the market. Generally speaking, there is no open market for brands, so that's a bit irrelevant. You could look at what it costs you to create it or might cost to recreate it. Hypothetical, not really terribly relevant. The main one is what income does it generate? Now, the way that we do it, and I think the way it should be done, is first you value the expected future stream of revenue from the branded business to put a value on the branded business. So you can see the big blue circle is the discounted net present value of the expected future earnings stream from this particular business. And then within it, we attribute a piece, and that's the brand value. Now, they actually say there are 2 ways you can put a value on that piece. You can use indirect methods where you just take the revenue and apportion, say 20% of it, 25%, based on some kind of analysis. And you say 25% of the revenue belongs to the trademark or the brand in that business. That is sometimes known as the interbrand approach. Sometimes people say that that is slightly a black box because they don't know how the percentage is derived. So the method that most financial people prefer are what's called direct methods on the left here. And they outline a number of direct methods that you can use. It is not prescriptive. It gives you alternatives. So what they're saying is you as a valuer are trying to identify the specific value of that trademark in the context of the business. For example, you could look at price premium, but obviously that doesn't take into account volume effects. You can look at cost savings, but most brands are not really about cost savings, they're about revenue. And the 2 that are left are the margin or earnings uplift effect, where you look at the whole business model and say, well, what difference does the brand make to it? But the simplest method, the one that accountants tend to use for balance sheets, is called royalty relief, where you just imagine someone's going to license me this brand, what will I pay them for it? So you have to work out what you would pay that person and take that as a charge against the business. That is the most common method for valuing trademarks, to put them into those balance sheets that I mentioned at the beginning. And it's perfectly reasonable as a technical valuation method. But let me say, for marketers, the most important thing is the value of the branded business. The most important thing is the margin or earnings uplift effect across the whole business. And that's what you need to focus on when you're doing strategic brand valuations. Look at the branded business, what effect uplift is it having? Whereas for technical valuations, it's very much, just give me a snapshot at a point in time, I'll put it in my balance sheet. Now, our league tables that were published the other day is a royalty relief valuation. It's perfectly acceptable for financial reporting purposes, and in fact, that's why we did it that way. But the most interesting studies that we do are the ones that look at the branded business as a whole. and try and work out how can we increase that by pulling all of the strings and manipulating all of the levers. They also say that you have to put down a number of things. So this is consistent with that requirement for transparency that Bob Eccles put forward. The position and status of the appraiser, why you're doing it, identify the subject brand very clearly, what are the brand-related assets you're valuing, who are you addressing it to, what is the premise of value, in other words, going concern or not, what approach and methodologies have you used, the date of the valuation, and the value date. The value date might be the 31st of December, the valuation date might be the 31st of March. So I valued it on the 31st of March, but with effect as at the 31st of December. Where did my data come from? What are my key assumptions? What limitations? All of that needs to be exposed, and it's consistent with that view that we should have transparency. And finally, it demands, more or less, that it should be done independently to avoid conflicts of interest that might affect the result. So our approach, just coming back to that chart here, as I said, we look at the three different levels. We tend to focus on the middle level. The middle level is the area where you have most impact in saying how value can be increased and grown. We also value the trademarks in the middle, but we focus on saying how do we increase the value of the branded business. And as a process, first of all, we do a brand audit to make sure we understand everything, the business and so on. Then we do what we call value mapping. Value mapping is that point I made a moment ago about understanding how the business works. So, for example, here are a few clients we've worked on in the last year or so. Right. A cognac business, its business model is entirely different from a hotel and leisure business. With cognac, you make the stuff, you stick it in barrels, and you can't sell it for 10 years. It evaporates. You distribute it via different means. Hotel and leisure, you build a hotel, and if you don't fill it, you don't have occupancy, you don't make money. So the nature and structure of the businesses are completely different. And actually, there's one in here which is quite interesting. The loyalty voucher card business. This was a company where you pay them money, they put it on a card, and you give it as a gift to somebody. Normally, they charge you 5% for putting it on the gift card. They charge the retailer 5% for redeeming it, and they hold your money until you redeem it. So they have about 3 or 4 different revenue streams. They have to be quite careful in the way they do their marketing, because if they do too much marketing, people redeem them quicker. And if they redeem them quicker, the fourth revenue stream is if people don't redeem them, they keep the money. They expire after 9 months. So they have this dilemma in their marketing department. How much do we promote usage of those loyalty cards? Because if we promote it and spend lots of marketing money, what happens is we get the money spent quicker and we don't get the write-offs. So when they look at that, they might say, let's not market at all. We'll make more money out of it. So they have this equation. Is promoting the use of the card better for getting future sales, or is there a limit to the amount of sales anyway? So you have that whole debate about what's best for the way that their marketing business should work. And if the marketing people do not understand the financial mechanism of the way the firm works, they will never understand really what they should do. And this is in the oil business, retail fuel, you're working through a retail network of shops on the side of the road. You have to have a retail team and a product portfolio, and you've got business and domestic customers, but you go through that network. Another business in the same company, which is liquid petroleum gas or lubricants, it's totally intermediated. Nothing goes direct to customers. It goes through distributors. So half your marketing is to distributors. So any marketing you do is a pull through the distributors. So the business model is entirely different. In order to understand how the brand adds value, you have to know how that works and know where you should be putting your emphasis. Should you be putting it on the distributors or the end consumers, or what's the balance? And many industries are like that. So you have to understand that. Then you have to go through that whole brand equity thing I mentioned to understand what drives demand. And only then do you sit down and do your valuation and draw conclusions. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a brand in the UK called Hovis. Hovis is one of the oldest and best known brands in the UK. Now, this is very much a UK example, but I think actually it has a lot of echoes for here in Turkey. This was a traditional high quality brown bread that originally was sold like that, out of wrapping. And the Hovis brand was stamped on the side via the tin. And they used to sell it in bread shops. Gradually, they began selling it in supermarkets, and they put it in a plastic wrapping. But frankly, the wrapping was boring. You know, it was kind of like white wrapping with no particular features. And they only made the brown bread. And initially, they didn't even slice it. So while they were famous, well-known, and actually, the other thing that one should know is this was the first brand that was ever valued by Interbrand as part of a defense takeover because their share price was too low. And we were trying to actually push up the share price to avoid being taken over. An Australian company called GFW was trying to take them over. So they managed, the brand valuation helped to fend off the acquisition. They then carried on trading, but they were becoming increasingly irrelevant to the consuming public. So that's where this story starts. So for example, if you look at their share, their volume share was entirely geared to their relative price under everyday low pricing. The supermarkets were driving down the price and then the volume went up. Not very helpful. Because then what happened was, because their prices were going down, their margins were going down, they had to cut their advertising. As a result of which, their key competitor, called Kingsmill, another bread brand, were spending money, and it was going up. Kingsmill had a different portfolio, a wider portfolio, so they were spending more. As a result of that, their ad revenues were going down, and their brand awareness was going down. So they sat down and they looked at all the research, and they had a lot of research. What was it? What are the drivers of acquisition? Why were people buying Kingsmill, not Hovis? And they started off by looking at their heritage. What do they stand for? It's all about wheat, germ, flour, bread. They looked at their field of competence. It wasn't just brown bread. They were good at all bakery products. They then looked at their point of difference. Hovis is good for you. It's a bit like that example that John gave before the break. You know, it's not just about making matches. You can do anything to do with the fire category. And Hovis could do anything in baked products that was good for you. So they looked at their target audience and realized that the old product was largely appealing to old people. So they wanted to make it relevant to the mothers that actually buy it and give it to their children. So then they looked at the personality and sort of talked about that for a while, and then they worked out the mission to provide everyday goodness for everyone. Right, so it was all about everyday goodness, not about brown bread anymore. So the first thing they did was completely jazz up their packaging and used econometric modeling to demonstrate that the packaging drove significant sales in supermarkets, which they then went to the trade and said, look, we're getting higher sales pull-through because we got this great packaging. They also produced brand new ads that weren't traditional but were now appealing to kids. They also diversified. I think actually this was a product that originally came from Australia, and Hovis just said, well, that's a good product. It's a mixture of brown and white bread. So mothers can feel happy that they can say it's healthy because it's brown, but kids like it because it's white and it's soft, really. And once again, they were able to trade people out of own label white bread into this best of both stuff at a substantial price premium. You can see there, it went from trading up from 29p loaves to 59p loaves. So product innovation, packaging, advertising, all changing the attributes that described the Hovis brand. Now, the actual sales when this campaign started were substantially higher than the previously predicted sales. And as a result of that, the contribution margin to the business was substantially higher. And this chart shows what happened to their market share. Their market share went from being second, just over 15%, to something like 21% over the period of the campaign to rebrand and relaunch them. But it continued. And a couple of years later, their market share had got to 30%. Now, coming back to brand valuation, all of that analysis was done by the marketing department, but in close cooperation with the finance department. Like a lot of companies I know where they have a smart finance director, the smart finance director was doing the analysis in order to fuel his valuation model. And if you look at a discounted cash flow valuation model, okay, this is a simplification of a brand valuation model, you can see here that your historical performance contributes 0 to the value at today's date. It tells you what the value might be. So whatever you did historically just is telling you what you might do in the future. The real thing is, what will you do in the future? What do people believe you will do in the future? The next 2 years probably account for about 20% of value in most valuations, and usually they're relatively predictable from operational measures. The next 3 to 5 years maybe represent another 20 or 30%. The real value comes in the end, more than 5 years out. And you could say, well, that's rubbish. How do you know what's going to happen 5 years out? The reality is, where it comes to asset valuation and share valuation, it's what people believe will happen 5 years out that matters. So the short-term measures drive their long-term strategic view about the overall valuation of the business model. And you can use desk research and econometrics and predictive research that will help you to determine what that projection looks like. That is a strategic valuation. Now, you might say, well, how much use is that? It's very useful where it comes to the point that I started with, which is about share prices. This company, Hovis, was owned by a private equity company called Doughty Hanson. They wanted an exit, and they wanted a successful exit. As a result of doing all this work, they increased the bread category. They increased they've got a very healthy return on their advertising spend. Their sales leapt because their market share went up, and the profits leapt accordingly. They then decided to make their exit, and it was a very successful exit. Now, it might not surprise you to hear that the person that was driving the whole marketing agenda and who was almost telling the marketing department to spend more was the finance director. He was telling them to do it because he was preparing the company for a successful float. Now, fine, that's a one-off transaction, but many other companies want to do the same thing in order to convince their investors that they've got a valuable property on their hands, that they've got a valuable branded business. So sometimes people say there is a conflict between finance directors and marketing directors. I don't think there is, as long as they speak the same language, which is about value creation. And usually that means value creation for investors. So finally, you can do a brand scorecard and just measure it from time to time, where you show the segments and you show what the values are and you show what you're spending and so on. And then you can make decisions about whether you should move that around. I won't bore you with all that at the moment, but that is a good idea in order to optimize value. In fact, we did something like this for a food company here in Turkey last year, for Pınar, looking at their portfolio to say where and which brands should they really be allocating more resources to build the business. So in conclusion, here's the old saying, what gets measured gets done. There are a number of measures you can look at, from promotional payback, short-term customer profitability, simple correlation and regression, through multiple regression, predictive research, and at the top of the pyramid, or the top of the list, is that kind of strategic brand valuation and branded business valuation I've described. I think it is a very helpful tool in conjunction with these other short-term tools to help drive the strategy of businesses. I would strongly recommend it to you. And just to conclude, make sure you communicate with that CFO. This is a piece of research that shows most CEOs speak to their finance director more or less every day and trust them more than anybody else. So if you convince the CFO that the marketing agenda and the marketing budget will add value to the business, he will be your ally, not your enemy. And the very last slide is, at a time of recession, this was done in a recession at the back end of the 90s. And in fact, this comes from a firm called Profit Improvement of Marketing Strategies, which is based in London. They measure things, marketing actions that might have improved profits. And they took 750 companies, roughly, and said, in a recession that had just happened, who cut, who maintained, and who increased during that recession. And what they demonstrated was that those who cut, the share of market change 2 years into the recovery, after the recession ended, obviously the cutters had much lower growth in their share of market than those who increased during the recession. So what this is arguing is, advertise harder and more during a recession, because everybody else is cutting back. That's your chance to build your brand equity. So when you come out of the recession, you grow. And they then looked to see what was the return on capital employed, and they found that the higher return was for those that increased. Now, I suspect probably the advertising industry was behind all this. They were trying to persuade everyone to keep advertising. And the final chart there shows that they demonstrated a higher return from pure advertising than mixed or promotional spend. Now, this is a slightly old study. And I think probably nowadays that would be flipped. You would probably get more from promotional and internet spend than you would from advertising. But my hunch is the same argument would be true. When budgets are down and people are cutting, it's best to spend into that if you have a good proposition. And I would suggest that that is a lesson that brands in Turkey might take as they go abroad, if they can get their proposition right and advertise heavily into the recessions or market heavily into the recessions in places like the UK, they'll come out the other end with strong and valuable brands. Thank you.
Good David. Bir teklif var. Eğer uygunsa son konuşmacımızı da dinleyip, eğer karnınız acıkmadıysa fazla, tamam. Ondan sonra devam edelim diye. O zaman davet ediyorum. Dear Coin.
Okay, well, good afternoon, and thanks for having me earlier. It's a true pleasure to speak for you today, and also very easy after these two great speakers, because a lot of things that I wanted to say actually have already been repeated. My focus will be on marketing, actually, in driving brand value. So my name is Koen Pauwels, originally from Belgium. Spent 12 years in the US and now at Özyeğin University, and have been building market dashboards and linking marketing to financial value for about the same time now. When I was in the US, and I'm going to start with a marketing example, I was exposed to this commercial that you may have not seen in Turkey. It's one for the most boring product that you can ever imagine. Anybody in the insurance business? This is an insurance company that basically said, well, we want to sell supplemental insurance. So you're employed by a company. We want you to pay extra for additional benefits over the health benefits you get by your employer. And their name was AFLAC. It's the abbreviation of a very long name. And so they asked an advertising agency in New York to try to come up with a good commercial, to try to sell to you that you should buy this supplemental insurance. And here's the commercial that they came up with. You play? Oh.
Well, when I got hurt in this work, thought I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that? AFLAC.
Well, even the best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does? AFLAC?
Should ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
AFLAC. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Okay. So got that one? This is an advertising agency. The guy was running around in New York. He said to himself, AFLAC, AFLAC, what does that sound like? And then he heard the ducks. And he said, how about having a duck as a spokesperson for an insurance company like that? And in the commercial, they actually talk about the key value proposition that you heard about, right? So what did it do to AFLAC Incorporated? Was it successful? Marketing people love this example. They say, look, brand awareness 2% in the target market in 1999. We got it to 80% in 2001. And then they continued to having more and more of these commercials, and they got it to 85%. Company revenue shot up from about 555 million in 1999 to about 712 million in 2000 and 919 million in 2001. And again, an attribution analysis showed that most of that was due to just this line of commercials, right? So how do you evaluate the financial success of such a commercial? What is the return on duck investment, as I say, right? So first of all, if you just attribute the full lift in awareness to the duck commercial, so from 2 to 85, you end up with this enormous increase, 3,000% increase in awareness. They got more sales leads, people calling to try to get information about this in the first 2 weeks of 2000, when this aired, than in the 2 years combined before. And then, of course, we have this revenue increase, 28% immediately and 66% over a few years. What people in marketing didn't understand is how expensive this campaign was. So everybody loved the commercials. They did more and more. And over the 6 years, they spent $450 million on this campaign. So when a new CMO came in 2006, you can imagine what he said, right? He said, shut the duck up. This is going to be way too expensive. Really prove to me that in the long term, you have increased the brand value by as much as 450 million. So a very typical example of things that I've worked on. This is a repetition from previous slides. You know that your bosses, chief executive officers, chief financial officers, more and more demand marketing accountability. And what they typically mean is demonstrate the value of what you do in marketing to the brand, to my financial performance. When you talk to companies in the Sabanger holdings, all of the general Muderu, all of the managers are talking about their EBITDA, right? How can you increase my earnings before taxes? And that's a very strong measure that they share with their marketing people. This is also repetition, but just to show you that we can speak the language of financial people within marketing. So typically in marketing, we build these market-based assets. We show that we have better channel relations. A great example, Sony in Eurasia. So Sony figured out that retailers of electronics are extremely hard hit during any recession. You all remember the recession of 2001 here in Turkey, right? So the big companies like Sony and Samsung, they wouldn't even tell retailers what they would charge as a wholesale price the next day. So complete uncertainty. What happens in 2006, 2008? Sony goes to retailers and says, well, there may be a recession coming, but we will guarantee these wholesale prices for the coming weeks and months. So better channel relations. What do they hope to achieve as market performance? That any time they have a new product, and that happens a lot in your markets, that retailers will give them a lot more shelf space, will have their salespeople talk a lot more about the products. So if you get better channel relations, it shows in faster accelerated profits, something that John was talking about. And of course, financially, that shows in the fact that you can accelerate cash flows. The same goes for brand equity. A lot of brand equity is the fact that you can charge a higher price. So if your product goes and sells in France, for instance, and people pay a certain price, and then you say, well, this is my brand, or even harsher, this is a Turkish brand, are people willing to pay more or less for your brand, right, for the same product? So if that happens, of course, you're enhancing cash flows. And that's the language that finance loves to hear. Customer equity, you have a share premium, people love to buy from you, it typically stabilizes your cash flows. So some updates on the research that David was showing you is that in the current recession, yes, companies that spend more on marketing typically outperform those that don't. But it's specifically helpful to have a great brand and very loyal customers to stabilize your cash flows. So when a recession hits, if you don't feel strongly about your brand, you can easily switch to a cheaper alternative. But when you're really passionate about the brand, think about Apple, think about telecom companies in Turkey, then you stick with them. And then finally, of course, having a lot of great business networks, right? Knowing where to outsource your production to China or to some other country or to another region in Turkey, that helps reduce your service costs and, of course, will increase the residual value of your cash flows. So most of the things we built, let's say, within marketing as market-based assets immediately impact market performance, which increases cash flows. The tough thing, I think, in most of our businesses is to show and demonstrate, to quantify how that happens. One example that I love to give, so again, I was in the US in '99 when Honda launches the Odyssey product. It had a minivan before, and the only thing it did in '99 was to install this wonderful cheap innovation of foldable back row seats that are now standards in all minivans, I believe, right? So the competitors had the information. Chrysler could do it, everybody could do it, but their market research was showing that it increases the noise in a car. So Chrysler was saying, we're not going to put it into our minivans because we think that consumers won't like the noise. Honda marketeers said, no, we'll put it in. Our research showed that this is going to be fantastic. And what I show here, so this is the introduction of the 99 model in October 98. This is the dealer gross margin on Honda Odysseys. So talking about price premium, right? So how much the dealers get for your car went from around $1,000 to $3,500 and stayed that high for the coming years, even when competitors matched the innovation. So great example of how one thing in marketing that you can do, and in this case got imitated by competitors very quickly, increases the price premium. Honda did not want to give me their price premiums. Companies rarely give you their costs unless they're very transparent, but they assure me that their profit went up in about the same way as the retailers did. Did this impact the Honda financial value, the market capitalization? So that's a study I did in the car industry. And so, of course, the Honda Odyssey is just one part of their car business. The car business is just one part of the whole of the Honda group, as you know. So what I showed in the paper is, this is the number of weeks. And now on the chart is the firm value of Honda as market capitalization. So how much do they trade for as shares times their stock price? And you see with the introduction of the Honda Odyssey, the stock market didn't really know. You know, there was some, and this is the significant lines which we like to put in econometrics, there was some significant increase in Honda market value of the whole company at the time of just this one innovation, but investors were really looking at how consumers were going to react, right? So it took about 8 weeks of consumer positive reaction before investors had bid up the value of the company to its stable new higher value. So this is a chart that I love to give to my finance colleagues, like Kenneth French in Dartmouth, and say, look, the investors may be very smart, but they don't know some information. In this case, they didn't know right away what the consumer reaction would be, and so there's a great opportunity for us to communicate that to them. So financial markets are very smart, but they don't react right away. The same thing what I did in America was to analyze the impact of all their price promotions and rebates, right? So General Motors came up with employee financing, that you get the same price on the car as their employees. And so what you typically see in the American car market is that having lots of price promotions and rebates bids up your stock price right away. Because everybody knows you have a lot of fixed costs, you have to get rid of the cars in your inventory, but it reduces your financial value in the long run. Because ultimately you're training your customers to buy on deal. And every single year, talking to GM, Chrysler, and Ford, they told me we just have to give these crazy $8,000 rebates on a sport utility vehicle, only on the old model. Because you will see in October we'll come out with our new model, and that's going to be fantastic. It's going to blow the competition away, and we will never discount our new model. And every October the competition was not stupid, and also came up with great models, and the market share stayed about the same, or even declined in the case of General Motors, and they had to discount again because they trained the consumers to buy on a discount, right? So contrast that with a company like BMW, which had me wait for 3 months for a car, which only works on order at the time, where they got their price premiums to be much higher and got a lot less people asking for discounts. So it's very tough to measure brand value. I've done this now in the US, in Europe, and in Turkey for several years. What you typically get in companies is that the returns are too vague, right? So how, even with an econometric model, how can people in your company actually trust? And so chief executive officers and financial officers are very wary of what I call brand babble. And I see a lot of that in Turkish marketing departments. So they say things like, well, you know, this is going to be really cool. We need to be number one on Facebook, right? Facebook is very big in Turkey, as you know. Third Facebook nation in the world. So if only we had the number one automotive site on Facebook, it's going to be fantastic. And they spend 30% of their budget on it, and then they find out that their test drives don't increase. And if you don't get people to test drive your cars, the sales also don't increase, right? So they do very cool stuff, but how does it contribute to getting people in the cars and to actually buy them and to your price premium? So you have to show that what you do, especially if it's a big investment, actually contributes to the bottom line, short-term and long-term. So how do you do that? You just have to track how the brand plays in the marketplace. And there's a lot of great data available also in emerging markets to help you do that. And so, you know, also citing Tim Ambler, you know, an asset is accumulated goodwill about a brand that hasn't necessarily translated into any revenue yet, but you can quantify and you can get pretty close to what the value of it will be. And I always say in marketing, and finance people hate me for that, but I always say in marketing, it's better to be vaguely right than precisely wrong, right? So even if marketing is the toughest job in a company, and I know it is, you know, you have your competitors doing stuff, your customers, the government is changing regulations, you can get pretty accurate and you can get better and better over time if you start measuring now. And you see which measures are useful for your company and you start to update them. So the brand terminology depends on the functions. Chief financial officers typically want to measure this financial asset. The head of your marketing, or the general müdür typically in Turkey, wants to measure how branding affects behavior, whereas people in the marketing department are much more interested in what can I do to impact how consumers feel and think about me. So this is the language you have to bring together. And so this is and it's very similar to what John and David have shown, right? So if you think about your market into what the US marketers do, so marketing builds brand value in the minds and the hearts of the consumers. So marketing is typically the guy that's shouting through the megaphone, right? And then hopefully, I think she likes us, right, the consumer. And then ultimately, you're interested in what people do in terms of buying more of your products for a higher price, or using it more frequently. So I'll just give you two examples of ways in which I have researched this one, right? I'll put two companies that I like. So Starbucks, which now has, 7 outlets just on Badat Street, right? And is competing with Gloria Jeans and Café Dunyas and so forth. So they say if you only focus on short-term returns, then you're going to miss out on a lot of the brand value. So Starbucks is known as a third place. You overpay for coffee there, as you all know, because you want to have the nice, comfortable feeling. I was in the meeting at Starbucks, this is now 11 years ago, where the chief operations officer stood up and said, I have a great plan to save money. We're going to replace the toilet tissue in our restrooms from the comfortable 3-sheet to the 1-sheet you find in airports. And he had calculated that they would save something like $70 million a year worldwide. And it took the marketer, everybody was nodding, to stand up and say, no, people are overpaying for coffee here, right? They're waiting in line. This is the third place. This is the place they come to meet colleagues, to meet friends and family. There's no way we're going to save money on such a small thing and jeopardize the fact that we may lose out in the long-term competition. So you have to have the guts and typically also the numbers to stand up against such initiatives, if you know you're right. Another company I like, EB Games, that was amazing when I went to them. So this is a game company. And they said every person in marketing here was the chief financial officer of another company before. I think it's a unique situation. So we know that it's very important to demonstrate returns. If you ask for a marketing budget of $5 million, then we say, okay, what happens if we take 1 million away? How much less revenue will you make, right? So they're very rigorous in this one. But they say, we know we lose money when we use a flight to ship new games to the customer, but it builds our long-term brand value. And so we know that's important for us. How do you typically quantify this? And I typically look at this brand funnel, and I think David has a wonderful example of it too. This is a very generic one. Your own business has a slightly different version of a brand funnel, right? So the idea is that people move through different stages. If you have a long purchase cycle, if you're selling business to business, or if you're selling a car, this is typically months or even years. If you're selling a food product on the supermarket shelves, this could be a matter of days or weeks, right? So people typically, they need to be aware of your product, they need to consider it, they need to prefer it, take some action, and then there's this wonderful loyalty component. So if you look at all the metrics that you can have, and companies will come to you and have lots of metrics for this one, it tends to get pretty confusing, right? Does it matter? So in a paper in the Journal of Marketing Research, I showed, and this is statistically, that knowing these metrics, knowing things like awareness, consideration, and preference, helps you to explain your performance, in this time sales, much better than just knowing your marketing actions. So this chart shows that basically we can explain about 50% of sales by marketing and mindset metrics, as I call them. And about half of that is your own mindset, so what people think and feel about you, and what people think and feel about your competitors. So you get much better able to predict your own sales in the future if you know how people think and feel about you and your competitors. Seems very obvious, but I mean, I've been in Turkey now for 4 years. I've seen most companies not systematically tracking how people think and feel about them. You can also track the wrong metrics. And I love these examples. Continental Airlines, right? They used to track on-time departure. They used to reward people on online departure, and that was in the compensation package of their managers. Of course, it turns out that customers don't care at all about on-time departure. They care about on-time arrival, right? So same thing for Turkish Airlines, right? I really don't care that it's always a huge jam at Atatürk Airport and that we're 7 planes waiting and that we leave half an hour later. I do care if I'm too late in my end destination. Starbucks got completely on the product side, right? They convinced themselves that everybody loves just the product features of coffee as much as they do. So they used to evaluate themselves on the selection of beans in a Starbucks, on the new beverages you bring, the chai lattes and so forth, and on high quality tea. And then, you know, they started doing some research, and it turns out that some customers care a lot about that stuff, of course, but most customers care more about a clean store, friendly staff, and specifically fast service, right? So I live in Jeddah Bostan, and I vastly prefer Caffè Nero over Starbucks there on the beach. And it's not just because I have a sweet tooth and I love chocolate and so forth. It's because the line is always much longer at Starbucks, and I have a limited amount of time to spend in line. So what did they do in the US, you know, and also in Turkey? I think they have these carts now, right? So you can pre-order your coffee, and you can walk in and just pick it up. So once you know that fast service is more important to most of your consumers than to have a huge selection of beans and a lot of people, a lot of choice, you can do something specific to help you with that one. So it's very important to measure the right stuff when you're doing these metrics. I have a whole methodology which I won't bore you with to come up with these things. But so I find that companies are typically very good to come up with a whole bunch of metrics that could potentially drive how customers feel and think about you. I typically see between 100 and 200 things that people in your company, you know, you look at marketing, you look at your business units, you ask some consultants, I see a huge amounts of stuff that could matter in your company. So what I do with my econometric analysis is to boil it down to the few metrics, typically between 10 and 20, that are actually leading sales, that you can see changing before your market share drops, and that are the most important value drivers. So that is the journey that I've been on for the last 5 years in different countries. So just again a few examples, EB Games. So there's some metrics that you can check that are leading your sales and your performance out there. Other ones are lagging. They happen at the same time as your sales changing, or even later on. So EB Games found out that things like consideration, competitive preference, inquiries, trials of their games, that was leading their sales. Whereas things like brand awareness happened after people bought. So in their specific business, they said, well, the fact that brand awareness is down is very interesting for us diagnostically to explain why our sales are down, but it doesn't help us to prevent it because it happens at the same time as our sales are down. Same thing with the major bank. This is First Tennessee Bank in the US. So they found out that their market spending and loyalty scores were very predictive of what was going to happen to their brand, whereas awareness and household retention was not. And none of these things are obviously before you do the analysis. Right? So all of these things could have mattered, but it's thanks to the analysis that you can come up with what is actually most important for my brand and what happens there. As part of a huge project, this is the European Union and TÜBİTAK, I looked at this question across industries in Turkey, in the US, and in Europe. And here are some very interesting thoughts that come from it. The emerging markets here are Brazil, Indonesia, India, and China. So these were industries like personal care, deodorants, medicine, snacks. The one thing that came out as very important was whether people are aware of your advertising or promotion. And no brand expert, including our friend Kevin Keller, will actually tell you that, right? So brand awareness is, if you have an established brand, it's something that don't varies much, right? So let's say brand awareness of Turkish Airlines or Turkcell, let's say it's 99%. And it doesn't change much over time. So it doesn't help you much. Whereas if you ask the simple question, have you seen any advertising or promotion of the brand in the last 6 months? That varies a lot. People report having seen your advertising even if you did not advertise. So it's a measure for how top of mind you are with people, what we found across markets. And so that is a metric that came out as very strong to predict sale in our analysis, and that was completely absent from any kind of other approach that companies used. Consideration or relevance to people and liking or convictions do come out as key drivers of sales. So whether people say they know your brand, but is it relevant to them? And do they like or prefer it? That's very important. But the relative importance depends on which industry you're in and in which country. So if you are in a low involvement product or in a mature market, then how much people love your brand is going to be very important, right? So if you're selling a certain kind of pencil here in Turkey, are you selling, even cell phones in the US? The brand love is extremely important. People have the money to act on their brand love. They consider you because you're in the major retailers, and that's the key driver we find of sales. Whereas consideration is much more important in emerging markets and for high involvement products. So if you advertise something relatively expensive, let's say your product is 500 lira in Turkey, then people will right away notice it if you do your advertising right, but they will first ask all their family and friends. And only if people say, yes, that company has reputation, the brand is basically good quality, only then will people put your brand into their consideration set. And that has a huge impact on whether they will buy you when push comes to shove and they have to make a purchase. So just like we did the same research in China. So Lenovo is, a very key laptop producer. And they got very big in China just on functional attributes, on consideration. In China, Chinese consumers did not have to love Lenovo to buy Lenovo. They're now trying to become big in the States, and they now realize in the States people have to like the brand somehow. So what is the most important sales driver we found was different in, for instance, China versus the US for the same manufacturer. So how important are functional versus emotional attributes, coming to David's presentation, may really much depend on your category and on which market you're selling this in. So this is what we typically find. So our structure is mostly, well, how responsive is a certain mindset metric to your marketing? Can you change it, right? If I say brand preference is very important, but there's no marketing action that you can do to change it, that will be hard. And then to what extent does the mindset metric convert into sales? These are my 2x2s. So for instance, let's say consideration in mature markets, I find it didn't respond so much to marketing and it had a low sales conversion for the brands that I looked at. Whereas liking in mature markets, you can change it with your advertising and it converts very nicely into sales. And then consideration converts very highly into sales for an emerging market like Turkey. The problem is that your marketing is only part of what gets people to consider it, right? You basically have to stimulate word of mouth in Turkey, and that gets people to put the brand ultimately into the consideration set. It's a huge study, and I can only summarize it in the limited time I have, right? But I put my website on later if you want some more detailed insights. So the message here is it does matter. Brand metrics are important. You can link them to financial value, but you can't just take some study and say, well, it works for this other brand in this other category in this other country, so it will work for my brand in Turkey in this category. People in your company say, well, what about the Turkish situation? And they will be much more convinced if you can do the analysis for your own brands, even if it's imperfect, to show exactly where you should invest in and what that brings in terms of brand value. The final thing, I think I'm the youngest person in the audience, so I have to talk about online stuff, right? So you may have heard in the press and on blogs that a lot of people have said that this purchase funnel is dead. It's completely irrelevant, right? So that this whole awareness, consideration, preference, action, and loyalty is completely irrelevant because people are now going online. For the smallest product, even a paperclip, or for the most expensive products, business-to-business URLs, there's YouTube videos now that explain to you how to apply it within your own production facility, right? People just, Google stuff, they search for stuff, and they look at social media online. And so I think McKinsey is one of the most vocal proponents of this one, right? So McKinsey is saying what people do is they have some initial awareness of your product or your brand. Then they go in this active evaluation. They do a lot of stuff online. And they will put brands into their considerations that they were not there before. So that's a key difference. They're saying, it's good that people know your brand name, but if you're very small offline but very big online, you can compensate for that. So it's not a funnel that people narrow things down. They don't start from 10 brands that they're aware of, narrow it down to 5 they consider and so forth. They start from a few, let's say, car brands, and then they look online and they add brands. And that, of course, gives the purchase and then gets back into posting your experiences on social media and you influencing other consumers, right? So one key thing we did this is with a study with Google and JFK in the Netherlands. We said, well, is this really true? Has the old offline funnel of consideration preference, has that lost its relevance? Should we only check the stuff that Facebook and Google give us in terms of fans and so forth? So you have the classic funnel, typically based on offline surveys that your consumers take. And then you have this online funnel that is very interesting, but only based on a few people. You know who's responding to you online, right? Typically the people who are your biggest fans are your biggest haters. And so the question there is, do we get a nice representative overview of our consumers? Does it differ on the product? And can you as a manager do something about this? And so it was a very wide study. So we had 15 categories, cars, internet, energy, travel, but also the typical fast-moving consumer goods like cheese, snacks, and butter. And then tissue and napkins. So a big question is what comes out of this one, right? Is it the fact that people only look for hotel and travel? Or do they also look for things like cheese, beer, and brands online? Well, so here was the study, and I don't put up any econometric model, but so we combined everything that the firms did in marketing, so their advertising, their promotion. On the left side, we have this classic funnel, so we had measured awareness, consideration, and so forth. On the right-hand side, we had our online metrics. So people typically speak about paid media, what you have as paid search ads for Google or Facebook. Owned media, how many people come to your website, what do they do there? And then, of course, the earned media. How many social media references do you have? How many people speak positively about you in forums and so forth? And so we had all of these effects on sales and then controlling for the environment. Consumer confidence in the economy, the temperature is very important if you're selling beer and so forth. So this is the overview of the methodology. What we found, very simply, key results. Number one, these new funnel metrics indeed matter. And we found that even for the typical low involvement products. So even if you're selling cheese or snacks in the Netherlands, I would love to do this in Turkey once, right? You have better power to explain your sales if you also know what people say about you online. How many people visit your website? But of course, online is more important if you're into this huge product purchases, right? So durables, cars, and energy. people start looking for cars about 3 to 4 months before they're thinking about buying them, and how many people visit your website, configure a car, and so forth, is a huge explanation for your sales 2 or 3 months out. So in high involvement products where more people go online to check out social media and so forth, of course it's more important to check these metrics than for low involvement products. And then finally, suppose you're in a situation where online metrics are very important. We said, well, does that mean that you have to shift all of your marketing money to online marketing, right? So if most people are online and they look for your product, does that mean that offline marketing has no space? And we find, of course, the opposite. That is that things you do with your offline marketing tends to be a huge predictor of how many people go to your website, how many people click on your paid search ads, how many people like your Facebook page, and so forth. So we found that specifically TV ads in all of these categories were pretty powerful in driving online metrics, in driving how many people talk about you and look you up online, which then in turn was very good to predict sales. And the question I typically get then from marketing people is like, how do you do this, right? And we had John's wonderful picture about P&G deodorants up there. So how about I put up a more appetizing picture of a P&G deodorant, right? So this is the Old Spice campaign. So Old Spice was a very old brand, you know, the name says it itself, old-fashioned, had a kind of a sailor image. P&G brought this brand of deodorant and said, well, what can we do to spice things up? It does market research. It turns out that 60% of all male deodorant is bought by women. Right? You buy it for your husband, your boyfriend, maybe your son, right? So they said, well, X has the whole kind of, if you put X on you, then you will attract all the ladies positioning, right? We want to have a position that is much more appealing to women because they control the purse. They buy a lot of the male deodorant. And we want to get a nice conversation between men and women started. So they had this TV ad. Oh, wonderful. Do we have a generator? No. So they had this TV ad with this ridiculously handsome guy. He's kind of a B actor called Isai Mustafa. They aired during the Super Bowl. And so it was a classical TV ad, but they got so much nice response to it, they put it online, on YouTube. And then a famous person started blogging about it. And so then P&G said, let's have this guy answer to the blogs, right? So they got 100 million views, 30,000 tweets about him. And ultimately, they could double their sales in 1 year. And are still going very strong. And I want to put this challenge to your company and saying, can you pull something like this off, right? One of the most amazing examples is Isai proposing to a girl for the engagement. So this was one of the guys that was tweeting, said, well, I want to propose to my girlfriend. I have this engagement ring. And basically, I want him to do it for me. Can't you please do that? And so P&G put this all together, right? They had the guy. So he comes up on YouTube and he says, with the name of the girl, of course, would you marry, not him, that would be the ultimate, right? So would you marry this guy? And then, of course, the girl tweets and she says yes. So it's a happy ending. Now, guess how long it took P&G from the tweet of the guy saying, can you do something, till putting this YouTube video online? Guess how long it took? 2 months. It had to go to their legal department. You know, think about what happens in companies, right? They did it in 2 hours. So I'm like, this guy must be constantly half naked in his bedroom to answer to all these things, right? So they had the whole staff online to do this literally in a matter of hours. And the metrics that you get online now, you get much faster. The response to this one was immediate. And if you do something wrong online, then you get also the immediate response, right? So we can use these online metrics as a great way of getting more real-time feedback. And very often, they later on translate in the more representative samples, right? In the JFK studies, about in Turkey, how much is awareness, consideration, and preference for your brand. But it offers a wonderful opportunity to complement your brand metrics with something that you can measure right away. It also gives a wonderful view of you guys to experiment, right? So whenever I go into a company and I look at their advertising and price and I tell them to cut their advertising in half, people say, no, we can't do that, right? We believe your model, but if we save 2 million on advertising, then it just goes to the company. As a manager, I don't see anything of that. But if I lose even 0.5% market share, I get fired, right? So why would I do anything that you tell me to do? So there's a fear of experimentation. There's a fear of increasing our prices, reducing our prices, doing more on promotion, repositioning our brands. Online, it's so easy with your paid search ads, with website landing pages to experiment with different tactical executions. And so the question I always guess is, yeah, this is a great campaign, but how did P&G knew this was going to be so successful? And the answer is simply they didn't. They did the best they could with their market research. And so this was one of the things they did. But they kept track of it very nicely. They showed right away that this experiment was going to be very successful in the early indicators. And then they could do much more and get much more money to scale it up. So if you have such a system in your company that you can recognize creative marketing that's actually going to drive sales, then you can have the confidence that finance will give much more budgets to that because the link is being made. So I always say in marketing departments that is kind of bean counting, as they call it, right? Checking the brand value, looking at accountability. People in advertising are very afraid that it will diminish their creativity. I'm like, no, we want your creativity, but we just want better experiments so that we can tell very early which ad campaigns, which repositioning is going to be very successful for a brand and our finances and which not. And we're going to reward you on these things. Lego is another great example. Lego was so boring 10, 15 years ago. And it's a brand that I know and love. You know, in Belgium, we say if your kids are playing with Lego, they're going to become an engineer. If they're playing with Playmobil, you know, they're going to become artists or managers. But so Lego was very basic, right? And they had the guts to kind of come up with all of these new things. Lego Friends, you know, aimed at girls now, is a fantastic innovation, I think. But where do they get some of their data from? This is just Google Trends. So within countries or within regions or even cities within a region, you can see which kind of products that you have are people more searching about. And so they have all these costly innovations, right? Star Wars, Harry Potter, Batman, Indiana Jones, Batman. So how do they know which one are going to be successful? Well, in different parts of the world, Star Wars is more successful. In other parts of the world, Batman is more successful. But thanks to tracking this thing online, they know where to put more emphasis in which country in the world and which things to promote more. So that gives you a very nice complement to your traditional kind of purchase funnel, I find. So, you know, just to end, right? So the future of brand finance, if I may speculate on that one, feel the force. This is another Lego figure. So number one, I think it's very important to check the predictive value of the new funnel and the classic funnel. So whatever you're doing to kind of your assumptions about how customers move through the process of buying your brand, how well does it predict? And which things of it, and that may be too complicated, you may have to simplify it down, or you may be missing some metrics. How good is it to predict your sales and your financials weeks out, months out, and so forth? So that's number one. Number two is you have to define the best funnel for your brand. So whenever I come in companies, we typically start for some kind of benchmark. You know, something that has worked in the same industry before or in a similar country. But ultimately, all of these companies have gotten down the learning curve and came up with the metrics that were most important to them. We had Coke as an example. You know, Coke used to track 150 metrics, and they have now narrowed it down to just 5. So in every country and every region, they have just 5 metrics that they know will be very predictive for their brand. And so one of them is daily drinking. How many people in the country or in the region drink at least 1 Coke a day? They used to measure 60 measures about preference, top of mind, and so forth. And they came up with daily drinking as the more stable and the more predictive measure. Right? Other things they do is, of course, you know, brand love over Pepsi. They track value for money, right? So Coke may be loved in Kyrgyzstan, but if people don't have the money to buy it, then it's not going to predict the sales. And they have a taste attribute measure. Is this a good taste, of course, right? So they have narrowed it down to 5 major attributes. And they've done that by trying a lot and tracking over time how good they predicted. So your brand may have a different kind of ideal funnel than your competitor has. Connect with the force. So I'm saying, your purchase funnel may be based on nice service across the whole of Turkey, but you can complement it with very nice real-time consumer response online. And then finally, as in anything in marketing, better to be vaguely right than precisely wrong, but we do want to be much more precise over time. So if you start doing that, you build a database in your company, and that's how large multinationals become so good. And you can start sharing things. You can try stuff out in Spain, and then your Turkish manager is saying, oh, I can try that out too, and vice versa. So the best companies, I say, they launch these things, and then they iterate. They learn, they share this information about what works and what didn't work all over the world, and across their departments. And they just get much better over time at linking marketing to what people do on the marketplace and to how important the brand is. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Şimdi tam istatistik vakti. Veriye ihtiyacımız var. Çok sorunuz birikti mi elinizde? Sormak için. Yani bir tercih. Yemekte rahat rahat oturalım. Kahvelerimizi içerken yakaladığınız konuşmacılara soruları sorun. Uygun mu? Peki. Buyurun, afiyet olsun.